The sea is vast, and full of secrets. For centuries, ships have vanished without a trace, some lost to storms, others to mysteries we cannot explain. Yet, their names live on as legends. The Flying Dutchman, cursed to sail forever. The Aurang Medan, with her crew dead under strange silence. The Carol A. Deering, abandoned without reason. And many more, vessels adrift between history and myth. These are the legendary ghost ships, tales of tragedy, mystery, and the unknown. Set sail with us into the darkness, and don't forget to subscribe. The mystery of the Flying Dutchman out on the vast, unforgiving ocean, where the line between horizon and sky blurs into endless uncertainty, sailors have long spoken of a ghostly ship. A vessel wreathed in mist, its sails tattered yet glowing faintly in the night. A ship that can never make port, cursed to roam the seas for eternity. They call it, the Flying Dutchman. Origins of the legend. To understand the story of the Flying Dutchman, we first return to the 17th century, a time when maritime empires were at their peak. The seas were both highways and battlefields, connecting nations through trade, exploration, and conquest. The Dutch, in particular, commanded great influence. The Dutch East India Company controlled routes stretching from Europe to the riches of the East Indies. Their fleets were powerful, their captains renowned for skill and daring. Among them, one name is whispered through centuries, Captain Hendrik van der Decken. According to the most common version of the tale, Van der Decken was a stubborn and proud man. In the year 1641, as his ship rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the treacherous southern tip of Africa, he swore he would complete his voyage no matter what storms lay ahead. When a violent tempest struck, instead of turning back, he is said to have cursed the heavens and declared that he would sail until Judgment Day if necessary. The storm consumed him and his crew. But the legend claims that the punishment for his defiance was eternal. The captain and his ship were doomed to wander the oceans forever, unable to find safe harbor. Thus, the story of the Flying Dutchman was born, not merely as a tale of tragedy, but as a warning against hubris, pride, and defiance of nature's power. Sightings through the centuries. Over the centuries, countless sailors have sworn they saw the phantom ship. These sightings often carried eerie details, a glowing light around the vessel, ghostly crew members moving across the deck, and sails that seemed to flutter though there was no wind. One of the earliest recorded mentions comes from the late 18th century. In 1790, a British ship near the Cape of Good Hope reported a strange vessel approaching through the mist. But as they drew near, the ship simply vanished, leaving no trace on the waters. Perhaps the most famous sighting occurred in 1881. The future King George V of Britain, then serving as a naval officer, documented in his log that his crew encountered the Flying Dutchman near Australia. He described a ghostly ship bathed in a red light, which disappeared suddenly. Hours later, one of his men fell from the rigging and died, a tragic event that reinforced the sense of curse and omen surrounding the phantom. Even into the 20th century, reports of the Flying Dutchman continued. During World War II, German sailors claimed to have seen the ship off the coast of Norway. Some accounts describe entire convoys turning course after such sightings, believing them to be bad omens. Each tale added to the mystery. Was the Flying Dutchman truly a cursed ghost ship, or merely a trick of the sea? The Cape of Storms. Central to the legend is the Cape of Good Hope. Known in earlier centuries as the Cape of Storms, this region was infamous for sudden squalls, massive waves, and unpredictable winds. For sailors in wooden ships, navigating the Cape was among the greatest challenges of maritime travel. Meteorologists now understand that this is caused by the convergence of the cold Benguela current from the Atlantic with warmer waters of the Indian Ocean. The meeting of these systems produces violent weather, sudden fog, and towering waves. In such conditions, it is easy to imagine how illusions might form. A mirage known as the Fata Morgana can cause distant ships to appear distorted, stretched, or floating above the water. When combined with fog and lightning, such visions could certainly inspire tales of a ghostly vessel. But why did one particular ship, one captain, become immortalized in legend? The answer may lie as much in psychology as in history. Symbolism and meaning. The Flying Dutchman became more than just a ghost story. To sailors, it was a symbol of doom, a warning that death at sea was always near. If you spotted the phantom ship, it was believed to foretell disaster, either for you or your vessel. For the Dutch themselves, the legend carried another meaning. Their empire was vast, but like all empires, it was fragile. The cursed ship symbolized both pride and punishment, the cost of daring too far, of seeking wealth and power at the expense of humility. Over time, the story evolved with culture. In some versions, the Dutchman seeks redemption, begging other ships to carry messages home. But the letters are cursed, anyone who accepts them meets misfortune. In others, the ship is crewed by skeletons or ghostly sailors, forever working yet never resting. This fluidity allowed the story to endure, reshaped by each generation to reflect its fears, its lessons, and its fascination with the unknown. The Flying Dutchman in literature and art. By the 19th century, the legend had moved from sea lore into literature, opera, and art. The German poet Heinrich Heine wrote of the cursed captain, describing him as a man seeking release from damnation. This version inspired composer Richard Wagner, whose 1843 opera Der Fliegende Holländer depicted the Dutchman as a tragic figure condemned to sail until redeemed by love. Painters also captured the ship's ghostly form. Works from the Romantic era show storm-lashed seas, with a spectral vessel emerging from lightning-lit clouds, a striking visual metaphor for humanity's smallness before nature's fury. Writers like Washington Irving and Sir Walter Scott wove the ship into their tales, while later, the Flying Dutchman became a staple of adventure novels and maritime ghost stories. Each retelling reinforced the ship's place in global imagination. It was no longer just a Dutch tale, but a universal symbol of mystery at sea. Science versus legend. Yet, skeptics point out that the Flying Dutchman could simply be explained by natural phenomena. The Fata Morgana, mirage, for example, can lift the image of a ship beyond the horizon, distorting it into ghostly shapes. Fog and bioluminescent algae can create eerie glows around vessels, especially at night. Lightning reflected on the water might briefly illuminate a ship and then vanish, creating the illusion of sudden disappearance. Furthermore, sailors at sea for months often faced exhaustion, malnutrition, and scurvy. Such conditions could lead to hallucinations, especially when mixed with the stress of storms. From this perspective, the Flying Dutchman may not be supernatural at all, simply the ocean playing tricks on human senses. And yet, legends persist because facts alone do not satisfy. The Flying Dutchman remains compelling not only because of what sailors saw, but because of what they believed it meant. The curse of eternity. At the heart of the legend is the curse of eternal wandering. A ship condemned never to rest, a captain bound by his own pride. Such a theme resonates deeply in human culture. Myths of the eternal wanderer appear across civilizations, the wandering Jew in Christian folklore, the cursed king in Nordic sagas, the restless spirits in countless traditions. These stories reflect humanity's fear of being cut off, from home, from redemption, from rest. The sea, vast and merciless, provides the perfect stage for such a tale. A sailor who dies at sea is buried in the waves, his body lost to the deep. What better symbol of eternal unrest than a ship itself, forever afloat yet never arriving? Modern adaptations. In the modern age, the Flying Dutchman continues to sail, if not on the seas, then through imagination. In films, books, and even video games, the ship appears as both terror and fascination. Popular culture has introduced it to audiences who may never have heard the old sailor tales. From Wagner's opera houses to Hollywood blockbusters, the Dutchman remains a vivid symbol of the supernatural ocean. Even today, sailors along the Cape whisper of strange lights in the mist, of ships seen where none should be. Satellite navigation and radar may explain away much, but the human eye still sees what it fears, or what it hopes to glimpse. Reflection. So what is the Flying Dutchman? A phantom cursed by God? A mirage born of sea and storm? A warning shaped by centuries of sailors' fears? Perhaps it is all of these at once. A legend rooted in history, nourished by imagination, and sustained by mystery. The Dutchman continues to haunt not because it is seen, but because it speaks to something deeper. The endless sea remains a place of uncertainty, even in the age of technology. And uncertainty breeds stories, stories that survive because they remind us of both the power of nature and the limits of human defiance. Closing: if you ever find yourself standing on a lonely shore, gazing into the mist over dark waters, imagine for a moment the outline of a ship, its sails glowing faintly, its crew silent, its course unending. The Flying Dutchman, they say, still sails. And perhaps, out there beyond the horizon, it always will. The mystery of Orang Medan. Some stories emerge from the sea that refuse to fade. They drift through time, carried by whispers of sailors and scattered reports, each retelling cloaked in uncertainty. One of the most haunting among them is the story of the SS Orang Medan, a ghost ship that appeared suddenly in the waters of Southeast Asia during the late 1940s, only to vanish into history with more questions than answers. It is a tale that lies between fact and folklore, stitched together with fragments of radio transmissions, newspaper clippings, and the eerie silence of a vanished crew. The details begin with a distress call. According to reports from Dutch and British newspapers of the time, several ships navigating the Malacca Strait received a faint SOS. The voice on the radio was broken, heavy with static, but the message was unmistakable. The operator identified himself as part of the crew of the Orang Medan, a Dutch freighter traveling these busy shipping lanes. His words, though fragmented, chilled those who heard them. He claimed that all officers, including the captain, were dead. Moments later, he added that the rest of the crew had also perished. The final message came through, garbled and barely audible: "I die." Then, only silence. One vessel, the American ship Silver Star, picked up the signal and altered course, determined to investigate. Hours later, it spotted the Orang Medan drifting aimlessly in calm seas, with no signs of life on deck. There was no smoke, no struggle, no obvious damage, only an eerie stillness clinging to the hull. Boarding parties were dispatched, climbing the side of the silent freighter, unaware of the scene that awaited them inside. The crew of the Silver Star stepped onto a ship frozen in death. Accounts claim that they found bodies strewn across the decks and inside the cabins, each corpse wearing an expression of sheer terror. Mouths were open wide, eyes staring upwards as though witnessing something unspeakable in their final moments. Some lay with arms outstretched, as if trying to ward off an invisible force. Others were slumped against the walls, their faces distorted into masks of agony. Even the ship's dog, according to some versions, was found dead with teeth bared in a silent snarl. Yet, curiously, there were no signs of violence, no wounds, no blood. The crew of the Silver Star reported an unnatural chill clinging to the air, despite the tropical heat outside. Searching deeper into the ship revealed no answers. The cargo hold offered no clear indication of what the freighter had been carrying. Some later speculations suggested crude oil, others chemicals, or perhaps something more sinister, an unrecorded, secret shipment. But at the time, the rescuers were left only with unanswered questions. With no survivors and no logs providing clarity, the mystery deepened. The only certainty was that the Orang Medan had become a floating tomb. The Silver Star crew attempted to tow the vessel back to port, but before their mission could succeed, the story took another twist. Smoke began to rise from the lower decks of the Orang Medan. Soon, flames erupted, spreading with alarming speed. The boarding party barely escaped as the freighter exploded into fire. Within moments, the mysterious ship was consumed, and finally, it sank beneath the waters of the strait. Whatever evidence it carried went down with it, leaving only fragments of testimony from the witnesses who had briefly stepped aboard. Since then, historians and researchers have struggled to separate fact from embellishment. Some argue that the entire incident was a fabrication, a maritime legend that grew from hearsay. The story first appeared in Dutch Indonesian newspapers in the late 1940s, later picked up by English-language publications. However, official records of the ship remain elusive. There is no concrete documentation of a vessel named Orang Medan in the registries of the time. For some, this is proof that the tale is no more than a sailor's ghost story. For others, it suggests deliberate erasure, as though someone wanted the ship's existence wiped from the record. Speculation about the cause of the crew's deaths has fueled debate for decades. One theory suggests that the ship may have been carrying dangerous chemicals, possibly remnants of wartime experiments. Exposure to leaked toxic gas could have killed the crew quickly, leaving no external injuries but contorting their bodies in death. Others point toward carbon monoxide poisoning from a malfunctioning boiler, which could explain the sudden collapse of so many men at once. Yet, the description of faces locked in terror seems inconsistent with a simple asphyxiation. More imaginative theories have also taken root. Some claim the ship was involved in secret experiments, transporting hazardous cargo across forbidden waters. Others hint at supernatural involvement, pointing to the bizarre circumstances and the sheer absence of rational explanation. The notion of paranormal forces has made the Aurang Medan a fixture of ghost ship lore, mentioned alongside the Mary Celeste and other legendary maritime mysteries. Unlike those cases, however, the Aurang Medan left no wreck, no surviving documents, and no way to investigate further. Skeptics highlight the inconsistencies in the timeline and sources. The earliest written accounts are vague, with some naming different dates or even different locations. The lack of verifiable records makes it difficult to confirm whether the ship ever existed at all. Could it have been a fabrication by newspapers eager to sell stories in a post-war world hungry for intrigue? Or perhaps it was a tale whispered among sailors that made its way to print, acquiring new details with each retelling? In the absence of hard evidence, it remains impossible to say. And yet, the story persists. The idea of an entire crew perishing in unison, their final message reduced to 2 haunting words, is too powerful to ignore. Maritime history is filled with unexplained disappearances, strange signals, and ships found drifting without crew. The Aurang Medan fits into this pattern, a symbol of how much of the ocean's history remains hidden beneath its surface. Each time the story is told, it resurfaces like the ghost of the ship itself, refusing to stay buried. Whether the Aurang Medan was real or imagined, it continues to serve as a reminder of the sea's endless mysteries. The ocean covers more than 2/3 of our planet, and much of it remains unexplored. It has swallowed countless vessels, erased evidence, and concealed secrets that may never come to light. Within this vast, silent expanse, stories like that of the Aurang Medan are born, fragments of fear and wonder carried on the currents, drifting into legend. Even today, some researchers still search for proof, an overlooked registry, a forgotten logbook, or a survivor's testimony. But none has surfaced. The trail ends with the sinking of the ship, leaving us only with questions. What cargo was hidden in its holds? What fate overtook the crew so suddenly and completely? And why did the story vanish from official memory, only to survive in scattered retellings? As the waves close over the last sighting of the Aurang Medan, the questions linger. Was it a freighter erased from the record for reasons too dangerous to reveal? Was it a tale exaggerated into myth? Or was it, as some suggest, a ghost ship in the truest sense, appearing briefly to terrify those who encountered it, then disappearing forever into the sea? The answer lies somewhere out there, in waters that have always guarded their secrets well. And so, the story of the Aurang Medan drifts on, unresolved, suspended between history and legend, a reminder that sometimes, the sea gives us no answers, only mysteries that refuse to die. The legend of the Lady Lovabond. There are tales upon the sea that slip quietly between fact and folklore, stories carried not only by the winds but by the whispers of generations. One such tale drifts endlessly through the currents of the English Channel, where time itself seems to fold back on a single name, the Lady Lovabond. The year was 1748, and the ship was said to be among the finest of her time, a schooner, sleek and proud, bound for adventure on the open water. She had been prepared with the utmost care, as though destined not just for a voyage, but for immortality. Her captain, Simon Reed, had reason to celebrate. He had recently married, and in defiance of a long-standing superstition among sailors, that a woman aboard a ship would bring misfortune, he brought his bride with him on the honeymoon voyage. To him, love and luck seemed inseparable. To the sea, perhaps, the defiance was not so easily forgiven. The crew was experienced, loyal, and trusted. The day was said to have been clear, the tide favorable, and the Lady Lovibond sailed proudly into the waters near Goodwin Sands, a treacherous stretch often called the Ship Swallower. For centuries, Goodwin Sands had been feared by sailors. Shifting shoals of sand and shallow water had claimed hundreds of vessels, burying them beneath the tide in silence. It was here, according to the legend, that tragedy struck. The story tells us that a man among the crew, jealous and heartbroken, watched as the captain celebrated his union. Perhaps he had once loved the bride himself, or perhaps bitterness grew from some deeper place. Whatever the cause, his jealousy burned so fiercely that it drove him to sabotage. In a moment of calculated vengeance, he seized the wheel and drove the ship directly toward the sands. The Lady Lovibond struck with tremendous force. Timber shattered, canvas tore, and within moments the ship was broken upon the shoals. The sound must have echoed like thunder across the channel. All aboard were lost, captain, bride, crew, and saboteur alike. The Lady Lovibond sank into the dark, her honeymoon voyage turned to a funeral procession, her name bound forever to the sea. It is a tragic story, but what makes the Lady Lovibond endure is not only the wreck itself, but what is said to have happened long after. For centuries, sailors have spoken of her ghostly return. Every 50 years, on the anniversary of her sinking, the Lady Lovibond is said to reappear near Goodwin Sands. Witnesses claim to see her sails shining in the moonlight, her masts tall and proud, her course steady, as though no time has passed since 1748. She is no wreck in these visions but a ship in her prime, bright, elegant, and fully alive. One of the earliest reported sightings came in 1798, exactly 50 years after the tragedy. Fishermen in the area told of a three-masted schooner sailing too dangerously close to the sands. They watched as it appeared ready to collide, yet no sound followed, no wreck, no cries, no debris. The ship simply vanished into the mist. In 1848, another half-century later, sailors reported the same. Again, a vessel appeared at Goodwin Sands, drifting silently and then fading from sight. By 1898, word of the Lady Lovibond had grown into something of a maritime legend, a ghostly cycle expected and awaited. Stories from that year told of men rushing to the coast, hoping to see her pass. Some swore they saw her sails cutting through the twilight. Others claimed the night was empty, save for the usual roar of the sea. In 1948, at the 200th anniversary, the pattern seemed to hold. Local reports surfaced of a strange ship sighted on the horizon, gleaming under the setting sun before disappearing as dusk fell. Then came 1998, when enthusiasts and folklorists gathered, waiting eagerly for her prophesied return. Some claimed they saw a flicker, a shape like a schooner in the haze. Others saw nothing at all. Whether seen or unseen, the Lady Lovibond remains one of the most persistent maritime legends of England. She is not a ghost in rags or a shadow among the waves. She is whole, proud, and silent. Unlike other phantom vessels, which appear in ruin or in flames, the Lady Lovibond is said to be eternally preserved, caught in the moment before tragedy struck, condemned to sail endlessly across the same cursed waters. But what lies beneath such a story? First, it is worth examining the Goodwin Sands themselves. Located off the coast of Kent, the sands stretch for nearly 10 miles, shifting constantly under the tide. They have claimed countless vessels, warships, merchant schooners, fishing boats, many with crews that vanished without a trace. Wrecks do appear from time to time, uncovered by storms before being swallowed once again. It is possible that the Lady Lovibond was among these wrecks, her remains hidden deep within the sands. Yet, unlike other ships, her name is bound not only to history but to prophecy, her scheduled return every 50 years. Some have suggested that the story was born not from fact, but from folklore. Perhaps the Lady Lovibond never existed as a physical ship at all, but as a cautionary tale crafted by sailors. The elements are familiar: the superstition against women aboard ships, the dangers of jealousy, and the merciless power of the sea. It could have been a fable, retold so many times that it became anchored in local tradition. However, there are references to the Lady Lovibond in maritime records, though sparse. The details align too neatly to dismiss entirely. A captain by the name of Simon Reed is said to have been real. The date of the voyage is consistently recorded as February 13, 1748, just one day before Valentine's Day, a detail that only deepens the poignancy of the tale. Whether or not the ship sailed exactly as told, the foundation of truth may rest beneath layers of embellishment. The ghostly sightings, however, remain unexplained. Are they mere tricks of the sea and sky? To sailors, mirages are not uncommon. Reflections of distant ships can appear distorted by temperature differences along the horizon, an effect known as fata morgana. Under certain conditions, a vessel far away may appear ghostly, suspended above the water or magnified into impossible shapes. Could the Lady Lovibond be nothing more than such illusions, seen on anniversaries when the story primed the mind to expect her? Or is it possible that the Lady Lovibond is something more? For believers, the ship is no mirage. To them, she is a memory imprinted upon the waters, replayed across the centuries like a haunting. Some call it a residual haunting, not a ghost with intention, but an event so powerful, so tragic, that it leaves an echo. Every 50 years, the sea repeats what it cannot forget. The Lady Lovibond sails again, not as a warning, not as a specter, but as a fragment of time forever caught in the tide. Psychologists might argue that expectation plays as large a role as vision. When communities gather in anticipation of a phantom ship, the human mind becomes eager, receptive, and suggestible. A shadow, a reflection, or even a cloud on the horizon may be enough to convince the eyes of what the heart already believes. The Lady Lovibond, then, could be the product of collective imagination, a folklore so strong it manifests as perceived reality. And yet, the persistence of her legend cannot be denied. 270 years after her supposed sinking, the Lady Lovibond remains a name known to sailors, folklorists, and storytellers alike. Few maritime tales carry such precise rhythms, returning on anniversaries with a cycle as predictable as the tide itself. If she appears again, it would be in 2048, 3 centuries after her fateful voyage. Already, enthusiasts and researchers whisper of the date, wondering if the Lady Lovibond will once more rise upon the horizon, or if she will finally fall silent. Perhaps she was a real ship, wrecked and lost to history, her story embellished into legend. Perhaps she was never more than a tale, a warning told among sailors to respect both sea and superstition. Or perhaps, just perhaps, the Lady Lovibond continues to sail in some way beyond understanding, her honeymoon voyage never finished, her sails forever filled with the wind of another world. The sea holds its secrets tightly. Beneath its waves lie countless wrecks, countless stories, countless lives erased yet never fully forgotten. The Lady Lovibond is but one name among them, and yet her legend has outlasted the wood of her hull, the voices of her crew, and the centuries that followed. Stand upon the cliffs of Kent on a February night, when the tide roars and the moon hangs low, and you may find yourself searching the horizon. Was that a schooner drifting through the haze? Were those sails gleaming against the storm? Or was it only the imagination, stirred by centuries of storytelling, reaching across the dark? In the end, the mystery of the Lady Lovibond is not about whether she truly sails again. It is about the power of stories to bind us to the sea, to keep us. The mystery of the Carol A. Deering. It was January of 1921 when a ghostly schooner was spotted off the coast of North Carolina, drifting aimlessly, its sails torn by the wind, its decks deserted, and its crew gone without a trace. This was the Carol A. Deering, a ship whose disappearance has become one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in American history. The Deering story begins not at sea, but in the shipyards of Bath, Maine. In 1919, when America was still emerging from the First World War, the Deering Company commissioned the construction of a 5-masted schooner. It was 255 feet long, built for cargo, and designed in the old tradition of wooden sailing ships, despite the world moving rapidly towards steam-powered vessels. Ships like the Deering were a dying breed, yet they remained useful for hauling coal, lumber, and bulk goods. Named after the owner's son, Carol A. Deering, the vessel embodied both pride and a sense of the past struggling to survive in a new age. The schooner was placed under the command of Captain William H. Merritt, a seasoned sailor with decades of experience. Merritt, however, would not remain at the helm for long. Soon after taking command, he fell gravely ill and was forced to step down. His replacement was Captain Willis B. Wormel, a veteran mariner nearing retirement. At 66 years old, Wormel was a strict but respected captain, known for his adherence to discipline. Alongside him was his first mate, Charles McClellan, and a crew of 10 men, young, restless, and untested in their loyalty to their new commander. In late 1920, the Deering was loaded with coal in Norfolk, Virginia, bound for Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The voyage south was long but successful. The ship reached Rio, discharged its cargo, and prepared for the return journey. It was here, however, that tensions reportedly began to surface. While ashore, Wormel confided to acquaintances that his crew was unruly, and he particularly distrusted his first mate. It was an ominous note in what otherwise seemed like a routine voyage. By January of 1921, the Deering was heading back north along the American coast. On January 28, the vessel was sighted by the Cape Lookout lightship, stationed off the treacherous North Carolina coast. The lightship's keeper recorded a strange event. A crewman hailed them, reporting that the Deering had lost its anchors and asking for the message to be relayed ashore. Curiously, the man who spoke was not Captain Wormel, nor did he appear to be an officer. Observers later remarked that his speech and manner seemed unfamiliar with maritime custom. Behind him, other sailors stood watching silently, a tableau that suggested something was amiss. That was the last confirmed sighting of the crew. 2 days later, on January 31, the Deering was discovered aground on Diamond Shoals, near Cape Hatteras, the infamous graveyard of the Atlantic. For centuries, these sandbars had claimed countless ships, and now the Deering was among them. When rescuers boarded, they found a scene that was both ordinary and unsettling. The ship's galley showed signs of recent activity, meals half prepared, dishes unwashed, as if the crew had left suddenly. The lifeboats were gone. The ship's logbooks and navigation equipment were missing. Yet there were no signs of violence. The sails were in tatters, but the vessel itself was intact. It looked as though the crew had simply walked away from a seaworthy ship, leaving behind a ghost. The U.S. government quickly launched an inquiry. Newspapers across the country carried the story, and speculation ran wild. Why would a crew abandon their vessel in calm conditions, leaving no trace behind? One of the earliest theories was mutiny. Captain Wormel had made no secret of his frustrations with his men. Perhaps the crew had turned against him, seizing the ship and then abandoning it after running it aground. This explanation seemed plausible, yet the evidence was thin. No bodies were ever recovered, and no one from the crew was ever heard from again. If it was mutiny, what became of the mutineers? Another possibility was piracy. The early 1920s were the beginning of Prohibition, a time when rum running and smuggling flourished along the American coast. Could the Deering have fallen victim to criminal gangs, its crew forced off the ship? Some speculated that the missing logbooks and instruments were stolen deliberately. Yet again, no evidence of attack or robbery was ever found. The Coast Guard also considered the weather. The waters off Cape Hatteras were notoriously dangerous, prone to sudden storms and shifting currents. If the Deering had struck trouble, perhaps the crew took to the lifeboats, hoping to reach shore. But no lifeboats were ever recovered, and the men seemed to vanish as completely as if the ocean had swallowed them whole. There was also an intriguing coincidence. Around the same time, another ship, the SS Hewitt, disappeared without a trace in the same region. Could both vessels have been victims of a larger, hidden danger? The idea fueled speculation, though no link was ever proven. More imaginative theories soon emerged. Some believed the Deering had been caught up in a ring of rum runners, its crew silenced to keep secrets. Others pointed to the so-called Bermuda Triangle, a region already becoming associated with unexplained vanishings. In the popular imagination, the Carol A. Deering became not just a wrecked schooner, but a symbol of the ocean's enduring mysteries. The official investigation, conducted by the U.S. Department of Commerce, involved interviews, reports, and speculation, but it reached no firm conclusion. By April of 1921, the inquiry was closed with the cause marked as unknown. The Deering was left to the sea. In the years that followed, storms tore her hull apart. By the mid-20th century, little remained but fragments scattered along the coast. And yet, the mystery has never been forgotten. For historians, the Deering represents a final chapter in the age of sail, a proud vessel lost at a time when such ships were already vanishing from the seas. For folklorists, it is a ghost story, a ship found empty, her crew swallowed by forces unseen. And for sailors, it is a reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature. What truly happened aboard the Caroline Deering? Was it mutiny by a restless crew? A calculated act of piracy? A desperate flight from a storm? Or was it something stranger, something we cannot yet explain? The sea keeps her secrets well. The Deering's bones are long gone, but her story endures, etched into the shifting sands of the graveyard of the Atlantic. She remains one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries of the maritime world, a ship adrift between fact and legend. And so, the image lingers, a schooner stranded on the shoals, sails ragged, decks empty, the voices of her crew lost forever to the wind. The question remains, echoing across more than a century, what truly happened to the men of the Caroline Deering? The ghost ship Bachimo. It was meant to be just another sturdy vessel of the Arctic trade, carrying fur, goods, and supplies across the frigid waters of the north. Yet, what began as a merchant ship's routine service transformed into one of the most enduring mysteries of maritime history. For nearly 4 decades, the ship known as the Bachimo drifted, abandoned and crewless, across the icy seas of the Arctic. Reported again and again, sighted in the most unlikely places, and always eluding capture, it came to be known simply as the ghost ship of the North. Origins of Bachimo. The story begins in 1914, in Sweden, when the vessel was launched under the name Angermanelfen. Built as a steel-hulled cargo ship, she was designed to endure harsh northern waters. Measuring over 230 feet in length and powered by a steam engine, she was solid and reliable. Initially, she served under Scandinavian ownership, transporting goods across the Baltic and North Seas. But her destiny shifted in 1921, when the Hudson's Bay Company purchased her, renaming her Bachimo. For the Hudson's Bay Company, one of the oldest trading enterprises in the world, the ship became an important tool in sustaining its Arctic fur trade. Each summer, she sailed from Vancouver into the far north, supplying remote trading posts and returning laden with furs. In these early years, she had nothing unusual about her, she was simply one of many ships braving the short Arctic season. Yet, the Arctic is a place where nature decides the fate of all things, and the Bachimo would soon become more than just a trading vessel. The winter of 1931, trapped. The turning point came in October 1931. After delivering a load of trade goods to remote Inuit communities and collecting her cargo of furs, Bachimo found herself trapped by early pack ice off the coast of Alaska, near the town of Barrow. At first, the crew hoped the ice would break quickly. They endured the cold, waiting aboard. But as days turned to weeks, and the Arctic night began its long descent, it became clear, the ship would not be freed that winter. The Hudson's Bay Company arranged for air evacuation of most of the crew, an extraordinary effort for the time. Only a small handful remained, choosing to camp near the vessel in makeshift shelters on the ice, guarding her cargo and hoping for a thaw. Then, one morning, a blizzard swept across the Arctic plain. When it cleared, the crew discovered the Bachimo was gone. They assumed she had finally been crushed and sunk beneath the ice. But days later, reports came in from hunters and local Inuit, the ship had drifted free, carried by the ice, very much afloat. Against all odds, the Bachimo had survived the trap. Abandonment in December, the remaining crew caught up with her again. But by then, the ship was badly battered, her hull damaged, and her condition poor. With the brutal Arctic winter deepening, the Hudson's Bay Company decided she was no longer worth saving. The cargo was salvaged as best as possible. The Bechimo was officially abandoned, left to the elements in the icy seas. Most ships, left in those conditions, would have quickly sunk or broken apart. But Bechimo was different. She refused to die. The first sightings by the spring of 1932, hunters reported seeing the ship drifting in the distance. Still intact, still afloat, moving silently along the ice floes. Word spread quickly among Arctic communities and passing vessels, the abandoned ship was still wandering. In the years that followed, the Bechimo appeared again and again. Sometimes she was seen trapped in ice, sometimes drifting in open water. Sailors attempted to board her, and on occasion they succeeded, exploring her empty decks, finding her still seaworthy despite years of neglect. But no one claimed her permanently. Weather, remoteness, and shifting ice always made salvaging impossible. Encounters with the ghost ship the Bechimo became a legend of the North. Hunters, traders, and explorers all told stories of encountering her. In 1933, she was boarded by a group of Inuit, who sheltered inside her during a storm. When they left, the ship carried on drifting. In 1939, a group of explorers boarded her again, reporting that she was still in remarkably good condition, though slowly decaying. Even into the 1950s, accounts continued, fishermen spotting her along the Alaskan coast, drifting silently, always just out of reach. Over the decades, the sightings painted a strange picture, a ship abandoned in 1931, yet refusing to sink, endlessly wandering the Arctic. Why didn't she sink? The persistence of the Bechimo raised a question: why did she endure when so many others did not? Part of the answer lies in her steel construction. Built in Europe during a time of robust shipbuilding, her hull was strong and resistant to the crushing power of the ice. Unlike wooden ships, which splinter and collapse quickly, Bechimo's structure gave her unusual resilience. Another factor was the Arctic itself. The cold waters slowed corrosion and decay. The ice, while dangerous, also acted as a kind of cradle, lifting her, dragging her, but not always destroying her. And because she was abandoned with her engines off and no fires burning, there was little risk of internal damage. She became, in a way, preserved by the very environment that doomed her. The last confirmed sightings by the 1960s, the Bechimo had become something of a ghost story, a tale told in northern communities and among sailors. Yet the reports continued. In 1962, she was spotted drifting near Point Barrow. In 1969, a group of Inupiat hunters saw her again, still afloat, still recognizable after nearly 40 years adrift. That was the last confirmed sighting. After that, the Bechimo vanished. Whether she finally sank, trapped beneath shifting ice, or continues to drift in some remote corner of the Arctic Ocean remains unknown. Theories and possibilities. What became of the Bechimo? Theories abound. Some believe she must have eventually succumbed, her hull finally corroding and breaking under decades of strain. If so, her remains likely lie on the seabed somewhere off the Alaskan or Canadian Arctic coast. Others wonder if she remains preserved beneath ice, occasionally surfacing only to vanish again. In such cold waters, even now, parts of her may still be intact. In recent decades, Alaska's government has launched efforts to locate her, sending search teams to scan the ocean floor, but no definitive wreck has been found. The Arctic is vast and unforgiving, and secrets are easily swallowed there. The symbol of a ghost ship beyond the practical questions, the Bechimo became something larger, a symbol. She represented the stubborn endurance of man-made things, surviving in a world of shifting ice and endless storms. She became the archetype of the ghost ship, not cursed or supernatural, but still haunting in her own way. Unlike the Flying Dutchman or other myths, Bechimo was real, documented, photographed, and confirmed. Yet her endless drifting gave her the aura of legend. Hunters whispered about her. Sailors scanned the horizon, wondering if they might be the next to catch sight of her. In the Arctic night, when silence reigns and the ice groans under pressure, one could imagine her steel hull drifting slowly past, a phantom of the sea, carrying with her the memory of another age. A reflection. The mystery of the Bachimo is not only about a ship. It is about the Arctic itself, vast, merciless, and filled with secrets. It is about humanity's struggle to master nature, and how often, nature proves stronger. And it is about endurance, the way steel and ice can conspire to keep something alive, long after logic says it should be gone. To this day, no wreck has been officially located. Perhaps she lies beneath the ice, preserved in the cold, awaiting rediscovery. Or perhaps she still drifts, unseen, far from the shipping lanes of the modern world. The Bachimo's fate remains an open question, one of the Arctic's last great mysteries. A ghost ship that refused to die, and a reminder that even in the modern age, some stories remain unfinished. The mystery of the Octavius. The sea has always been a place of wonder and terror, its waves carrying not only trade and exploration, but also whispers of ships lost to storms, swallowed by the deep, or condemned to drift forever. Among these tales, one story stands apart, the legend of the Octavius. A vessel said to have vanished into the icy grip of the Northwest Passage, only to be found decades later, its sails tattered, its crew frozen in place, and its captain still seated at his desk, pen in hand, as though time itself had stopped. Whether fact or fable, the Octavius remains one of the most chilling maritime mysteries ever told. The Northwest Passage, a deadly dream. To understand the story of the Octavius, we must first return to the dream that lured so many sailors into peril, the Northwest Passage. For centuries, European powers sought a sea route through the Arctic that could link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, providing a shorter path to Asia. But the quest was fraught with tragedy. Ice, storms, and the relentless cold crushed ship after ship, leaving wrecks scattered across the frozen north. By the 18th century, the Northwest Passage had become both a symbol of ambition and a graveyard for explorers. It was into this dangerous pursuit that the Octavius supposedly sailed. The voyage of the Octavius. According to legend, the Octavius was a merchant vessel launched in the mid-18th century. In 1761, she departed from London, bound for China. The voyage was long but successful. She reached the Orient, conducted trade, and prepared for the return journey to Europe. But here, the story takes its dark turn. Instead of retracing her path around Africa, the ship's captain chose something bold, some say reckless. Believing the Northwest Passage might be open, he steered his ship northward, determined to carve a path through uncharted Arctic waters. It was a gamble against the forces of nature. And nature won. Disappearance. The Octavius was never heard from again. Years passed, then decades. Families at home waited for word that never came. She became one of many vessels written off as lost, swallowed by the merciless ice. And so, the story might have ended there, just another name in the long roll call of vanished ships. But the legend insists otherwise. The rediscovery on a crisp day in 1775, a whaling ship named the Herald was navigating near the coast of Greenland. The crew spotted a strange silhouette on the horizon, a three-masted vessel, drifting silently. Her sails were torn, her timbers weathered, but she was unmistakably intact. Curious, the whalers drew alongside and boarded the derelict. What they found has haunted maritime lore ever since. The decks were eerily silent. The cold wind whistled through broken rigging. Below, in the dim light of the cabin, the mystery deepened. There, seated at his desk, was the captain, his body preserved by the Arctic cold. He sat upright, pen still clutched in his hand, as if frozen in mid-sentence. Around him lay the bodies of his crew, scattered throughout the ship, all seemingly locked in their final moments, as though death had come in silence and never left. The captain's log. The Herald's men, unsettled, searched the cabin further. On the captain's desk lay a logbook. Its entries told a chilling story. The last legible date read November 11, 1762, 13 years earlier. The entry described the ship's position, noting that they had entered the Arctic waters of the Northwest Passage. After that, the writing stopped. The conclusion was clear: the Octavius had been trapped in ice. Her crew had frozen to death, still aboard, still waiting for a thaw that never came. For 13 years, she drifted, carried by currents, before finally being released near Greenland. If true, this meant the Octavius had, in fact, completed the Northwest Passage, but with no living soul to tell the tale. Ghost ship or legend? The story of the Octavius spread quickly, carried by sailors' tales and popular retellings. She was called a ghost ship, a vessel condemned to wander the seas with a dead crew. The haunting image of a captain frozen at his desk became one of the most enduring images in maritime lore. Yet questions remained. Was the tale real? Or was it a legend spun from fragments of truth and imagination? Historical uncertainty. Unlike some mysteries, the Octavius leaves us with little hard evidence. No official ship's registry confirms her existence. No logbook from the Herald survives to corroborate the tale. Everything we know comes from retellings in newspapers, sailors' accounts, and later publications, some written decades after the supposed events. Historians argue that the story may have been an embellishment of real encounters with abandoned ships. The Arctic has claimed many vessels, and derelicts were sometimes found drifting years later. But the details of the Octavius, the frozen captain, the logbook dates, the 13-year drift, have the feel of legend. Could it have happened? Even if the story is exaggerated, could such a thing be possible? The Arctic climate provides a kind of natural preservation. Bodies can remain intact for decades in sub-zero conditions. Entire ships, like the Bachimo or the wrecks of Franklin's expedition, have been preserved by the ice for over a century. As for drifting, yes, currents and ice flows could carry a ship vast distances. The Beaufort Gyre and Transpolar Drift Stream push ice slowly across the Arctic Ocean, sometimes taking years or even decades to release what they hold. So while the Octavius as described may be legend, the idea of a ghost ship drifting with its crew frozen in place is entirely plausible. Symbolism of the Octavius beyond fact or fiction. The story of the Octavius captures something universal, humanity's confrontation with nature at its most merciless. The captain's ambition, to risk the Northwest Passage, symbolizes both courage and hubris. His end, frozen at his desk, represents the futility of defying forces beyond human control. For sailors, the tale was a warning, that the sea can turn on even the bravest, and that exploration always carries a price. Legacy. Over time, the Octavius became part of a larger body of ghost ship legends, stories like the Flying Dutchman, condemned to sail forever, or the Mary Celeste, found adrift with her crew missing. Yet the Octavius holds a unique place among them. Where others are tales of disappearance, hers is a story of being found, of a vessel returned to the living world, carrying the dead in eerie silence. The Arctic has always been a place where myth and reality blur. Explorers vanish, ice shifts, and strange things surface without explanation. In such a place, the Octavius feels almost inevitable, a story waiting to be born. Reflection. Today, we may never know whether the Octavius truly existed, or whether she was a cautionary tale born of seafaring imagination. But the legend endures, because it speaks to something deeper, the human desire to conquer the unknown, and the terrible price sometimes paid. Perhaps the ship did complete the Northwest Passage, her sails filled with icy wind, her crew long dead, her captain forever frozen mid-sentence. Or perhaps she never sailed at all, existing only as a phantom of story and superstition. What remains is the image, a silent ship drifting across the gray Arctic Sea, her timbers creaking, her sails torn, and her captain still at his desk, waiting, forever waiting. The Octavius remains, in history or in legend, one of the sea's most haunting mysteries. The Antarctic ghost ship Jenny. The sea hides many secrets, but the polar seas, where ice reigns supreme, hold mysteries that defy imagination. Among them lies the tale of a ship said to have emerged from the white silence of Antarctica, carrying not life but death. Her name was Jenny. According to legend, she was discovered locked fast in ice, her sails stiff in the frozen wind, and her crew long dead. Yet in the captain's cabin, a logbook was found, its final words recording not a storm, nor a battle, but the simplest and most chilling of notes: no food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. The story of the Antarctic ghost ship Jenny is part history, part folklore, and part riddle. To this day, no one can say with certainty what is fact and what is fable. But the tale endures, a haunting reminder of the extremes to which exploration can drive humankind. The age of sail and the polar frontier. To understand the story of the Jenny, we must first recall the age in which she supposedly sailed. The early 19th century was a time of relentless expansion across the world's oceans. Whalers, seal hunters, and explorers pressed farther south into uncharted waters. Antarctica itself had not yet been fully mapped, it was more idea than continent, a place of mystery glimpsed only by the boldest. Ships of this era were small by modern standards. Crewed by a few dozen men, reliant entirely on sails, and equipped with only rudimentary instruments, they were utterly at the mercy of storms, ice, and wind. To be trapped in polar waters was often a death sentence. It was into this world that the Jenny supposedly vanished. The voyage of the Jenny was said to be a schooner from the Isle of Wight, a sturdy British vessel used for trade and sealing voyages. Around 1823, she reportedly sailed southward, bound for the rich but perilous sealing grounds near the Antarctic Peninsula. The details of her journey are hazy, as no official records survive. What is claimed is that she pressed too far into the pack ice. Once the sea closed around her, there was no escape. Trapped in an icy prison, the crew endured as long as they could. Supplies dwindled. The endless cold gnawed at body and mind. At last, hunger and exposure claimed them, one by one. The Jenny became a coffin, drifting silently in the white wilderness. The discovery, 1840. The most chilling part of the story comes not from her disappearance, but from her reappearance. In September 1840, nearly 17 years after she was last seen, the Jenny was allegedly discovered by another vessel, the whaler Hope, out of Germany, commanded by Captain Brighton. The Hope encountered a ship frozen into the ice of King George Island, off the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. She looked weather-beaten, her sails still rigged but stiff as boards. Approaching cautiously, Brighton's men boarded her. What they found would make the Jenny one of the most enduring ghost ship legends of all time. The frozen crew on deck, silence. Below, death. The crew of the Jenny were all there, entirely preserved by the cold. In the captain's cabin sat the master himself, still at his desk. Before him lay the logbook. His body, so the story goes, remained upright, the ink frozen mid-stroke in his pen. The entries told the tale of the ship's final days. The last legible note read, May 17, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. 17 years later, his ship had carried him still, a ghastly witness to his last words. The legend spreads. The tale of the Jenny circulated rapidly after the mid-19th century. Newspapers in Europe and South America repeated the story, often embellishing it. Writers included it in collections of maritime mysteries. In these retellings, the image of the captain frozen at his desk became iconic, echoing the lore of the Octavius. The Jenny became shorthand for the dangers of Antarctic exploration, the isolation, the cold, and the ease with which an entire crew could vanish into silence. Fact or folklore? But here is where the mystery deepens. Did the Jenny really exist? Unlike documented wrecks such as the Erebus and Terror of Franklin's expedition, the Jenny leaves no hard evidence behind. Her name appears in sailors' lore but not in official registries of the period. No wreck has ever been confirmed. Some historians suggest the story was fabricated by 19th-century journalists, blending elements of real shipwrecks with the fascination for polar exploration. The Antarctic, still largely unexplored, was fertile ground for such tales. Others argue that while details may be embellished, the core event could be real, a ship trapped, discovered years later, its crew preserved in the ice. Such things are not impossible. Could it have happened? Science offers us clues. Bodies left in sub-zero Antarctic conditions could indeed remain preserved for decades, skin, clothing, even hair intact. Modern expeditions have found 19th-century explorers buried in ice whose features are eerily lifelike even after a century and a half. As for the ship itself, wood and rigging can endure for long stretches when sealed by ice. The cold slows decay, creating a kind of natural time capsule. Drift, too, is plausible. Ice flows and currents move slowly, but steadily. A ship trapped in pack ice could be carried great distances over years. So, while the Jenny may be legend, the idea is entirely possible. Symbolism of the Jenny. Whether true or not, the Jenny became a powerful metaphor. To seafarers, she embodied the ultimate fear, not death in battle or in storm, but slow starvation, locked in by ice, utterly cut off from the world. Her story reminded them that the sea was not only vast, it was merciless. To the public, the image of the frozen crew spoke to the fragility of human ambition. No matter how bold or skilled, man was small against the forces of the poles. And to storytellers, the Jenny provided the perfect ghost ship, no curses, no superstition, just stark reality frozen in time. The Antarctic connection. The Jenny also holds a special place because she is one of the few ghost ships said to come not from the Atlantic or Arctic, but from Antarctica. This gives her tale a unique flavor. The Antarctic remains one of Earth's last frontiers, a place where legends can still breathe. With no permanent inhabitants, few records, and vast expanses of unvisited ice, it is easy to believe that somewhere, beneath the snow, an old schooner could still rest, her timbers preserved, her crew waiting in silence. Later references over the years, the tale of the Jenny was reprinted in newspapers and anthologies of sea mysteries. In the late 19th century, she appeared in collections alongside the Flying Dutchman and the Octavius. In the 20th century, some writers revisited the story, noting the lack of evidence but still recounting the eerie image of the frozen captain. Even today, she appears on lists of the world's most famous ghost ships. The fact that her truth cannot be proven only deepens her hold on the imagination. Reflection. The story of the Jenny is not only about whether she existed. It is about what she represents. She stands for the price of human daring in the most hostile of environments. She stands for the silence of Antarctica, where time itself seems to freeze. And she stands for the enduring power of a story, one that needs no confirmation to capture the imagination. Perhaps the Jenny was real, and her remains lie somewhere beneath the shifting Antarctic ice. Or perhaps she never existed at all, born only from the fears and fascinations of sailors and storytellers. But either way, her legacy lives. When we think of the frozen South, of ships locked in the white silence, of captains writing their last words in the dim light of a cabin, we are thinking of the Jenny. A ghost ship not only of the sea, but of the mind. The mystery of Kaz-2, the modern ghost yacht. Ghost ships are often tales of the distant past, 18th-century schooners found adrift with their crews long dead, or merchantmen locked in Arctic ice. But not all such mysteries belong to the age of sail. Some belong to our own time. In April 2007, an ordinary Australian yacht named Kaz-2 was discovered drifting off the coast of Queensland. On board, meals sat half-eaten, a laptop was still turned on, and everything appeared normal, except for one thing. The 3 men who crewed her had vanished without a trace. What happened aboard the Kaz-2 remains one of the most haunting maritime puzzles of the modern era, a real-life ghost ship from the 21st century. The crew. The Kaz-2 was a 12-meter catamaran, privately owned and well-equipped for coastal cruising. On April 15, 2007, she set sail from Airlie Beach in Queensland, bound for Townsville, about 800 kilometers north. Her crew were 3 friends from Western Australia, Derek Batten, 56, the owner of the yacht and an experienced sailor. Peter Tunstead, 69, and his brother James Tunstead, 63, both longtime friends of Batten, but less familiar with sailing. For them, the voyage was meant to be part adventure, part retirement dream. They planned to take the Kaz-2 around northern Australia, and eventually across the ocean to Western Australia. They were not young men, but neither were they reckless. Reports later described them as cautious and practical, unlikely candidates for disaster. The voyage the Kaz-2 departed Airlie Beach in good weather. For the first 2 days, nothing seemed unusual. The yacht's journey was tracked intermittently by coastal surveillance, and her position appeared normal. But by April 18, something had gone wrong. A helicopter on routine patrol spotted the Kaz-2 drifting about 160 kilometers off the northern coast, near the Great Barrier Reef. At first glance, she seemed fine, her sails were up, her hull intact. But when attempts were made to hail the crew, there was no response. Authorities moved in to investigate. The discovery: when rescue teams boarded the Kaz-2, they found a scene that has since become famous. The yacht was in working order, with no signs of damage or distress. The engine was running and the radio functional. A table below deck held a meal, partly eaten. A laptop was powered on, as if someone had just left it. Life jackets were still stored neatly. The dinghy and emergency equipment remained untouched. Yet the 3 men were gone. There was no sign of struggle, no clue of foul play, no hint of where they had gone. To all appearances, the Kaz-2 was abandoned suddenly, in the middle of an ordinary day. Theories begin from the very beginning. The mystery of the Kaz-2 invited speculation. How could 3 grown men vanish from a yacht at sea, leaving everything behind? Investigators quickly ruled out piracy. The Great Barrier Reef region was not known for attacks, and nothing had been stolen. Suicide or deliberate disappearance also seemed unlikely. That left accident or misadventure. But what kind? The coroner's findings and official inquest was launched. Experts studied weather reports, the condition of the yacht, and the testimony of those who had spoken with the crew before departure. The coroner eventually concluded that the men had likely died in a series of accidents that unfolded in quick succession. The report suggested a chain of events something like this: snagged fishing line. At some point, a fishing line trailing from the yacht may have become entangled in the rudder or propeller. One of the men, perhaps Peter, leaned over or climbed down to untangle it. Loss of balance. In the process, he may have fallen overboard. Attempted rescue. The second man, James, instinctively tried to help, either by throwing a rope or climbing down himself. He too fell in. Final accident. The third man, Derek, may have rushed to assist, but in the commotion, the yacht was left unattended. A sudden gust of wind possibly caused the sail to swing violently, knocking him into the sea. Within moments, all 3 men were in the water, the Kaz-2 drifting away. Without anyone on board to control her, the yacht carried on under sail, empty, silent, and doomed to become a ghost ship. Supporting clues. Several details supported this version of events. The yacht's sails were found damaged, consistent with being left unchecked in shifting winds. A video recording, discovered later on a camera, showed the crew in good spirits the day before the disappearance. It depicted them sailing in light clothing, with no life jackets, one man fishing off the stern. Nothing suggested trouble, yet it showed how easily someone could have gone overboard. Weather records indicated sudden gusts and rougher seas in the area, conditions that could have caught the men by surprise. It seemed a plausible explanation: 3 accidents linked together in an instant, leaving the yacht to sail on alone. Unanswered questions. But even with the coroner's findings, not everyone was convinced. Why were there no signs of distress? Why didn't the men, if only 1 or 2 fell in, attempt to use the dinghy or radio for help? Why were their personal items, even their shoes, left behind? Some argued that the official version relied too heavily on speculation, trying to fit the facts into a tidy narrative. Alternative theories emerged: foul play. Some wondered if the men had argued and violence had ensued, though no evidence supported this. Medical emergency. Could one man have collapsed, leading the others into a chaotic attempt to save him? Sudden wave. A rogue wave or unexpected swell might have swept all 3 overboard at once. Yet none of these theories explained the strangely intact state of the yacht itself. The modern ghost ship. The discovery of the Kaz-2 was quickly likened to older ghost ship legends. Newspapers dubbed her the Mary Celeste of the Pacific, recalling the famous 19th-century brig found adrift with her crew gone. But what made the KAZ-2 so haunting was its modernity. This was not a tale from centuries past, it happened in 2007, in an age of GPS, radio, and coastal patrols. Yet it unfolded just as mysteriously as any story from the age of sail. For days after the discovery, Australians followed the case closely, imagining three ordinary men vanishing into thin air while their yacht carried on without them. The image of a meal left unfinished became iconic, proof, perhaps, that life can end without warning. Broader context: the sea, even in modern times, remains unpredictable. Every year, yachts are lost, sailors vanish, and accidents occur far from the safety of land. Most are explained. But occasionally, as with the KAZ-2, the facts resist easy resolution. In some ways, this story was a reminder: no matter how advanced our technology, no matter how well prepared we think we are, the ocean is still capable of swallowing us whole, leaving only questions behind. Legacy: the KAZ-2 was eventually towed back to shore, inspected, and released from investigation. She became infamous, her name forever linked with the mystery of her crew. For the families of Derek Batten and the Tunstead brothers, the loss was devastating. Closure came only in the form of speculation, the belief that the men likely fell victim to an accident of the sea. For the rest of us, the KAZ-2 remains a story told with unease, a yacht drifting alone, its systems working, its cabin tidy, its table set. A vessel with every sign of life, except life itself. Reflection: the mystery of the KAZ-2 is not about the supernatural. It is about fragility. Three men, full of plans and laughter, vanished in an instant, leaving behind a boat that seemed almost untouched. It is a reminder that the ocean does not always roar when it takes lives. Sometimes it does so quietly, without drama, without witnesses, leaving only an empty deck and a drifting hull. Like ghost ships of old, the KAZ-2 teaches us that the sea holds its secrets tightly. We may never know the full story. But perhaps that is what makes it endure, what makes us look at her photographs and shiver, even knowing it happened in our own time. The KAZ-2 is a ghost ship not from legend, but from reality. And that makes her mystery all the more haunting. The mystery of High Aim 6, the drifting ghost ship of Taiwan. In the vastness of the world's oceans, ships vanish every year. Some sink beneath the waves. Others are lost to storms, collisions, or fire. But occasionally, a ship is found, afloat, intact, and seemingly abandoned. These are the stories that captivate us most, the ghost ships of the modern era. One of the strangest of these cases is that of the High Aim 6, a Taiwanese fishing vessel discovered drifting in Australian waters in 2003. When authorities boarded her, they found no crew, no captain, and no clear explanation. The ship's system still worked, her stores remained stocked, and her cargo was intact. Yet the men who had sailed her were gone, vanished as if erased from reality. The vessel, the High Aim 6, was a longline fishing boat, part of Taiwan's vast fleet that operates across the Pacific. At just over 20 meters long, she was built for endurance, capable of traveling thousands of kilometers on extended fishing voyages. Her owner, based in Taiwan, employed a captain from China and a crew primarily from Indonesia. In the months before her discovery, the vessel had been at sea as usual, engaged in deep-sea tuna fishing. Nothing about her voyage suggested anything unusual. Yet somewhere between the fishing grounds of the Pacific and her intended port, something went terribly wrong. The discovery on January 8, 2003, the Australian Coast Watch spotted a vessel drifting about 80 nautical miles off the coast of Broome, in Western Australia. The ship looked seaworthy, no damage to her hull, no signs of distress. But attempts to radio the crew went unanswered. Days later, the Australian Navy boarded the vessel. What they found was deeply unsettling. There was no one on board. The ship's systems were still functioning. Fuel and supplies were in order. Personal belongings of the crew remained. Her cargo, freshly caught tuna, was still in the hold. The High Aim 6 was fully operational, yet completely deserted. Early clues: at first, investigators thought the ship might have been abandoned in a hurry. Yet there were no signs of struggle, no distress calls, and no damage to suggest a storm or collision. Even stranger, the ship's logbooks and documents were missing, as if deliberately removed. The only thing that hinted at what happened were a few small traces. Last radio contact: the vessel had last communicated in late December 2002, weeks before her discovery. Nothing in that message suggested trouble. Missing lifeboat: the ship's small dinghy was gone. Perhaps the crew had left intentionally, or been forced to. Theories begin with so little evidence, theories quickly multiplied. Mutiny: some suggested the Indonesian crew may have turned against the captain, abandoning the ship after a dispute. Without the logs, no one could be sure. Piracy: others speculated that pirates may have attacked. Yet the cargo remained, and there were no signs of violence. Accidental abandonment: could the crew have left temporarily, perhaps during repairs or an emergency, only for something to go wrong? Each theory seemed possible, but none fit the facts perfectly. A break in the case: weeks after the ship was discovered, investigators received a clue. One of the missing Indonesian crew members was found alive, back in his home country. Questioned by authorities, he admitted that the crew had mutinied, overpowering the Chinese captain and engineer before abandoning the vessel. The motive, however, remained unclear. Some reports suggested disputes over pay or conditions at sea. Others hinted at deeper tensions between the crew and officers. According to this version, the men killed the captain and engineer, disposed of their bodies, and then fled in the ship's dinghy, making their way back toward Indonesia. Loose ends: this explanation solved part of the mystery, but not all. Only one crew member was ever located. The others were never found. The alleged mutiny left many questions unanswered. How exactly had the men reached land from so far out at sea? Why abandon a working ship with fuel, supplies, and valuable cargo? Some doubted the survivor's story, suggesting he may have concealed more than he revealed. The ship itself gave no further answers. Stripped of her logs, she was little more than a silent witness. The fate of the vessel: after being towed to Broome, the High Aim 6 was inspected, photographed, and held for months during the investigation. Eventually, with no owner stepping forward to claim her, she was quietly scuttled at sea by Australian authorities. Her disappearance into the depths closed one chapter of the story, but left the central question: what truly happened to her crew, forever unresolved. Why the story haunts us: the case of the High Aim 6 stands out among modern ghost ship stories for several reasons. First, it happened in an age of radios, surveillance, and international shipping networks, yet the crew still vanished without a trace. Second, it blends the ancient image of a ghost ship with modern crime, mutiny, betrayal, and the possibility of murder. And finally, it reminds us that the sea, even in our time, remains a place where people can simply disappear. Comparisons to other ghost ships: the High Aim 6 is often mentioned alongside other modern mysteries. The CAS 2 of Australia, discovered adrift in 2007 with her 3-man crew missing. The Mary Celeste of 1872, perhaps the most famous ghost ship of all, abandoned mid-voyage with cargo intact. The Bechimo, drifting for decades in Arctic ice with no crew aboard. Each shares the same eerie pattern: a vessel found intact, its people gone, and explanations that never fully satisfy. Reflection: the mystery of the High Aim 6 is not supernatural. It is human. A story of conflict, desperation, and the choices men make at sea, choices that left a ship drifting alone, her decks empty, her cargo untouched. But like all ghost ship tales, it holds us because of what we cannot know. The missing crew who never returned. The captain whose fate is uncertain. The silent, empty boat discovered on a wide blue sea. In the end, the High Aim 6 reminds us that even in the modern world, with all our technology and laws, the ocean remains what it always has been: vast, untamed, and capable of swallowing human lives into silence. The mystery of MV Joyita, the ghost ship of the South Pacific. In October 1955, a small merchant vessel named the MV Joyita left port in Samoa on what should have been a routine voyage. She carried cargo, medical supplies, and 24 passengers and crew. She never arrived. 5 weeks later, the Joyita was found adrift hundreds of miles off course. Her decks were deserted. Her radio was tuned to the International Distress Channel. Bloodstains marked her floors. But her lifeboats were gone. Not a single one of the 25 people aboard was ever seen again. The mystery of the MV Joyita is one of the South Pacific's most haunting ghost ship stories, a puzzle of abandonment, fear, and unanswered questions. The vessel the Joyita was no ordinary boat. Built in 1931 as a luxury yacht in Los Angeles, she was originally designed for Hollywood film director Roland West. At 69 feet long, she was modest in size but well-crafted, built of strong timber with diesel engines for power. During World War II, the U.S. Navy commandeered her, using her as a patrol boat in the Pacific. After the war, she was sold to a civilian owner, who refitted her as a trading and fishing vessel. By the 1950s, the Joyita was operated by Captain Thomas "Dusty" Miller, a British-born sailor known in the region for his experience but also for his stubborn, sometimes difficult nature. Though the vessel had a history of mechanical troubles, Miller insisted she was seaworthy. The voyage on October 3, 1955, the Joyita departed from the port of Apia in western Samoa, bound for Tokelau, about 270 nautical miles away. On board were 16 crew members, mostly from Samoa and Fiji. 9 passengers, including a government official, a doctor, a child, and several islanders returning home. Cargo including medical supplies, timber, and food. The voyage was expected to take 2 days. Instead, the Joyita vanished into silence. The search when the vessel failed to arrive, search and rescue operations were launched across the South Pacific. Aircraft and ships scoured the seas for over a week, but found nothing. It was not until November 10, over 5 weeks later, that the Joyita was finally spotted by another vessel, over 600 miles from her intended route, drifting aimlessly in the open ocean. She was still afloat, but barely. The discovery when investigators boarded the Joyita, they encountered a scene that has since become the stuff of maritime legend. The ship was listing heavily to one side, her hull partly flooded. Her engines were not working. Her radio was tuned to the international distress frequency, but its wiring was faulty, making transmission impossible. Bloodstains were found on deck and in the captain's cabin. A doctor's bag was left open, containing surgical instruments and bandages stained with blood. Most hauntingly, all lifeboats were missing. Personal belongings of the passengers and crew were gone as well, suggesting they had evacuated. But no trace of them was ever found. What went wrong? The puzzle of the Joyita has confounded investigators for decades. Why abandon a ship that, despite flooding, was still afloat? Why take to small lifeboats in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean? Several theories have been put forward. 1. Mechanical failure and panic. The Joyita was known for her mechanical problems. On this voyage, it was discovered that one engine was not working even before she departed. When found, her pipes were corroded and her bilge pumps clogged. It is possible that a pipe burst, flooding the engine room and causing the ship to list badly. Believing the vessel was sinking, Captain Miller or the crew may have ordered evacuation. But experts point out that the Joyita had enough buoyancy, thanks to her construction and cargo, to stay afloat indefinitely. She did not sink even after weeks of drifting. If they had stayed aboard, the passengers and crew might have been rescued. Why didn't they? One answer may be fear. In the middle of the Pacific, with water flooding in and the ship tilted dangerously, panic may have overridden reason. 2. Injury or violence. The bloodstains and medical kit raised darker possibilities. Did violence erupt on board? Was there a fight, or even a mutiny? Some speculated that arguments among crew, or between Captain Miller and others, might have turned deadly, forcing survivors to flee. But with no bodies and no lifeboats ever recovered, there was no evidence to prove this theory. 3. Piracy. In the 1950s, piracy in the South Pacific was rare but not unknown. Some suggested that armed raiders may have boarded the Joyita, attacked those aboard, and forced them into lifeboats, or taken them captive. However, the cargo remained untouched, which weakens this idea. The pirates would have gained little from abandoning valuable goods. 4. Insurance fraud. Others looked at Captain Miller himself. He had financial troubles and a reputation for questionable decisions. Could he have staged the abandonment, hoping for an insurance payout? The problem with this theory is that it requires the cooperation, or elimination, of the other 24 people aboard. With no survivors and no sign of fraud afterward, the idea remains unlikely. 5. A chain of accidents. The most accepted explanation is a tragic chain of small events that snowballed. A pipe failed, flooding the engine room. With no pumps working and the ship listing, it seemed she might sink. The faulty radio meant distress calls went unheard. Perhaps someone was injured in the confusion, explaining the blood. Captain Miller, believing evacuation was the only choice, ordered everyone into the lifeboats. Once adrift, those lifeboats vanished into the endless Pacific, overwhelmed by weather and currents. It was not malice or conspiracy, but misjudgment and bad luck. Why it still haunts us. The mystery of the MV Joyita endures because of what was left behind. The image of a ship found with bloodstains, medical kits, and her radio tuned to distress creates a sense of suspended drama, as if the story froze in its most terrifying moment. And because none of the passengers or crew were ever found, the ending remains unwritten. Unlike a sinking wreck or a confirmed accident, the Joyita leaves only questions. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Joyita has been called the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, echoing the famous 1872 ghost ship also found abandoned mid-voyage. But unlike the Mary Celeste, which was discovered within weeks of her disappearance, the Joyita drifted for over a month, battered but still afloat. That makes her one of the clearest examples of why abandoning ship, except in fire, is often fatal. Legacy. After recovery, the Joyita was repaired and put back into service. But her reputation was never the same. Sailors whispered that she was cursed. Mechanical failures plagued her again and again. Eventually, she was retired and left to decay. The fate of her 25 missing souls has never been explained. Families waited for years, but no answers came. The Pacific, as always, kept its secrets. Reflection. The story of the MV Joyita is not supernatural. It is human. A reminder of how quickly confidence can turn to fear, how decisions made under pressure can seal fates, and how the ocean does not forgive mistakes. Her ghostly discovery, adrift, silent, her decks stained and her cabins empty, remains one of the most chilling maritime puzzles of the 20th century. Perhaps one day, new evidence will emerge, wreckage from a lost lifeboat, or testimony long hidden. Until then, the Joyita floats in history as she did on the Pacific, empty, haunting, and unresolved. A true ghost ship, and a lasting mystery of the sea. The ghost ship Gienseng, Australia's mystery freighter. Most ghost ships belong to the age of sail, schooners locked in ice, or yachts found drifting with meals left half-eaten. But in March 2006, off the remote northern coast of Australia, a very different kind of vessel was discovered. It wasn't a fishing boat or a pleasure yacht. It was a massive steel freighter. Silent. Empty. Drifting without lights or flag. Her name, painted in fading letters, was Gienseng. But beyond that, little could be learned. Who owned her? Where had she come from? Why was she abandoned? To this day, the Gienseng remains one of the most unsettling maritime puzzles of the modern age, a ghost ship the size of a small town, with no story anyone can prove. The discovery on March 22, 2006, an Australian Coastwatch aircraft patrolling the Gulf of Carpentaria spotted a bulk carrier drifting aimlessly near Weipa, Queensland. The vessel was about 80 meters long. She had no visible crew. No flag was flying. No radio signals were broadcast. The Australian customs vessel Storm Bay was dispatched to investigate. When officers boarded, the truth became even stranger. The eerie scene on board the Jianseng was a ghost in every sense, completely deserted, not a single crew member aboard. No signs of struggle, no blood, no damage, no evidence of violence. No documents, ship's papers, logbooks, and registration certificates had all been removed. No recent supplies, the galley and stores were empty. Rusted and worn, suggesting she had not been in active service for years. Curiously, in one storage compartment, officers found large quantities of rice. Why such a cargo was on board a derelict ship only deepened the mystery. Tracing the ship, her hull bore the name Jianseng, and investigators soon discovered she had once been a Chinese-owned coastal tanker. But beyond that, records were vague and inconsistent. She carried no identifying number. No owner came forward to claim her. No port filed reports of her disappearance. It was as though the freighter had simply appeared out of nowhere. Theories begin with no crew and no papers. Speculation about the Jianseng spread quickly. 1. Abandoned smuggling vessel. One theory suggested the Jianseng had been used by smugglers, perhaps for transporting fuel or contraband. Once her useful life ended, she was set adrift to avoid detection. The rice found on board could have been part of her illicit trade. 2. Tow gone wrong. Another theory was that she had been under tow when the towline snapped, leaving her to drift south into Australian waters. The absence of crew and supplies supported the idea that she was already retired, perhaps being moved for scrapping. 3. Ghost of the shipping industry. Some experts suggested she was simply an old vessel abandoned by unscrupulous owners who found it cheaper to cast her adrift than pay for proper disposal. This practice, while illegal, has happened elsewhere in the world. Why she haunts us. The Jianseng is not terrifying because of bloodstains, corpses, or mutiny. She is terrifying because of her silence. A ship of her size should have a paper trail. She should be registered, owned, tracked by ports. But she was none of these things. The idea that an entire steel freighter could drift into a country's waters with no explanation, no history, and no claimants is unsettling. It reveals the shadows in modern global shipping, where thousands of vessels crisscross oceans with little oversight. The Australian response. After thorough inspection, the Australian government decided the Jianseng posed no immediate threat. She carried no cargo that could harm the environment. But she was unseaworthy and a navigational hazard. With no owner to reclaim her, the authorities made a drastic decision: she would be towed out to sea and scuttled. In April 2006, just weeks after her discovery, the Jianseng was deliberately sunk in deep waters off Queensland. Her mystery went down with her. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Jianseng stands apart from older legends like the Mary Celeste or the Beichimo. Those vessels left behind puzzles of missing crews, frozen bodies, or half-eaten meals. The Jianseng left behind something subtler, the mystery of her very existence. She is most often compared to the High Aim 6, 2003, another modern ghost ship found adrift in Australian waters, though that case at least had a suspected mutiny and some surviving witnesses. The Jianseng has none. Just silence. Symbolism of the Jianseng. The Jianseng came to symbolize more than a maritime oddity. For Australians, she highlighted vulnerabilities in coastal surveillance. If a massive ship could drift into national waters unnoticed, what else might slip through? For the shipping world, she was a symbol of the industry's dark corners, vessels abandoned, reflagged, renamed, and forgotten, often carrying human or environmental risks. And for storytellers, she became another kind of ghost ship, not one cursed by the supernatural, but by bureaucracy, neglect, and secrecy. Why no crew? Perhaps the most persistent question is this: if the Jianseng was abandoned, why was she abandoned in this way? The absence of life jackets, lifeboats, or distress calls suggests her abandonment was deliberate and organized, not sudden or accidental. Her crew, if she had one, likely disembarked long before she entered Australian waters. But where? When? And why remove every scrap of paperwork? Reflection: the Jianseng is a ghost ship for the modern world, steel instead of timber, engines instead of sails, but mystery all the same. Unlike the Mary Celeste, she carried no tragic human story, at least none we can prove. Unlike the Bachimo, she did not drift for decades. Unlike the Kaz-2, she left behind no haunting image of meals half-eaten or radios left on. Instead, she left a void, no crew, no history, no answers. She shows us that ghost ships are not relics of the past. Even in an age of satellites and radar, a freighter can still emerge from the horizon with nothing but questions in her wake. The Jianseng was scuttled, but her mystery remains unsunk. Somewhere in her lost history lies the truth, whether smuggling, neglect, or abandonment. But we will likely never know. And so the Jianseng drifts still, if not across the ocean, then across our imagination, as one of the strangest ghost ships of our time. Antonia Grazza, the pop culture ghost ship. The ocean is filled with stories of phantom vessels, real ghost ships like the Mary Celeste, or legends like the Flying Dutchman. But sometimes, a ghost ship is not born from history, but from the imagination. In 2002, audiences were introduced to a new name in maritime horror, the Antonia Grazza, an Italian luxury liner portrayed as cursed, bloodstained, and eternally adrift. She was not a real ship, but in the years since, her story has become so iconic in film and horror culture that many believe she might have existed. The Antonia Grazza stands today as a pop culture legend, a fictional ghost ship that feels every bit as haunting as the real ones. Origins in film. The story of the Antonia Grazza comes from the Hollywood horror film Ghost Ship, 2002, directed by Steve Beck. The film introduced viewers to a salvage crew who discover a drifting liner in the Bering Sea. At first, the find promises riches. The ship is filled with Art Deco luxury, golden chandeliers, and abandoned treasures. But soon, the crew realizes they are not alone. The ship is cursed, her hulls haunted by the souls of passengers massacred decades earlier. At the heart of the story is the Antonia Grazza, whose fictional backstory gives her the presence of a legend. The fictional backstory in the film's mythology, the Antonia Grazza was launched in the late 1950s as a grand Italian ocean liner. She was elegant and opulent, designed to ferry the wealthy across the Atlantic in style. But during one voyage, tragedy struck. In the film's unforgettable opening sequence, a cable snaps across the dance floor, slicing through passengers mid-celebration. Dozens die in an instant. Later, it is revealed that sabotage, murder, and greed played roles in the ship's doom. The vessel disappears without explanation, becoming a ghost ship lost to the sea, until discovered decades later by unsuspecting salvagers. Though entirely fictional, the film gave her a history so vivid that she feels like she belongs among real maritime mysteries. Why it resonates. The Antonia Grazza captured imaginations for several reasons. The setting, the luxury liner, is a haunting stage. Her grand ballrooms, silent corridors, and decayed cabins create a perfect Gothic environment at sea. The opening sequence, the massacre scene, became one of the most shocking in early 2000s horror, cementing the ship in viewers' memories. The legend format, like the Mary Celeste or the Flying Dutchman, the film frames the Antonia Grazza as a lost ship suddenly rediscovered, tapping into the timeless fascination with abandoned vessels. These elements helped blur the line between fiction and folklore, making audiences wonder if such a ship might have really existed. Inspirations from reality. Though fictional, the Antonia Grazza was inspired by elements of real maritime history. Luxury liners of the 1950s, the design of the ship in the film draws from real Italian and European liners of the mid-20th century, such as the Andrea Doria, famous for her tragic sinking in 1956. Ghost ship traditions. The idea of a cursed vessel filled with the spirits of her dead passengers echoes centuries-old legends like the Flying Dutchman. Real abandonments. The eerie image of an intact but deserted ship recalls mysteries like the Mary Celeste and the Joyita. By combining real history with horror storytelling, the Antonia Grazza feels authentic, even though she never existed. Cultural impact. Despite mixed reviews on release, Ghost Ship developed a cult following. Horror fans embraced the imagery of the Antonia Grazza, decayed luxury turned into a tomb, a floating mausoleum carrying the echoes of the past. The ship has since become a pop culture reference point, cited in lists of the greatest fictional ghost ships. Referenced in horror forums and creepypasta as if she were real. Remembered especially for the shocking opening sequence, now considered iconic in modern horror. For many younger audiences, the Antonia Grazza was their introduction to the concept of a ghost ship, blending cinematic horror with maritime legend. Symbolism. Like all great ghost ship stories, the Antonia Grazza resonates because of what she represents: decay of grandeur. A ship once filled with luxury and life becomes a ruin, haunted by death. Greed and betrayal. The film ties her doom to human corruption, not just the sea. Eternal damnation. As a ghost ship, she becomes a prison for lost souls, doomed to wander forever. In these ways, the Antonia Grazza fits neatly into the long tradition of ghost ship mythology, even though she is fictional. Comparisons to real ghost ships. The Antonia Grazza stands beside real mysteries in the popular imagination. Like the Mary Celeste, she is found intact but deserted. Like the Bechimo, she becomes a wandering phantom of the sea. Like the Joyita, she raises questions of abandonment and fear. But unlike these cases, her story is scripted, designed to frighten, not to be solved. Why fiction becomes legend. The case of the Antonia Grazza highlights something powerful: fiction can become legend when it taps into primal fears. The sea has always represented the unknown, a vast emptiness where humans are small and powerless. Add to that the image of a silent, drifting ship, and whether the story is true or not hardly matters. People share it, retell it, and sometimes even confuse it with reality. That is how the Antonia Grazza, though invented for a film, earned a place in the wider canon of ghost ship stories. Reflection. The Antonia Grazza was never real. She never sailed, never sank, and never drifted across the seas. Yet she is remembered alongside the great maritime mysteries as though she did. Her story is a reminder that sometimes, the legends we invent can be just as haunting as the ones born of truth. Whether you see her as a horror movie set piece, a metaphor for greed and corruption, or a ghost ship in her own right, the Antonia Grazza endures. A ship of shadows. A liner of lost souls. A vessel forever adrift, not in the ocean, but in the imagination of all who watched her story unfold. The burning ghost ship, the legend of the Eliza Battle. The Mississippi River and its tributaries have always carried more than just people and cargo. They carry stories. Stories of steamboats that once lined the waters in the golden age of river travel, and of tragedies that left a mark on history. One of those tragedies became more than history. It became legend. In the winter of 1858, a luxurious riverboat named the Eliza Battle caught fire on the Tombigbee River in Alabama. Dozens died as flames consumed the ship in the freezing night. In the years that followed, locals told of a ghostly steamboat that still appeared on cold nights, drifting aflame along the river's dark waters. The story of the Eliza Battle is at once a true disaster and a lasting ghost ship legend of the American South. The riverboat era. To understand the Eliza Battle, we must first recall the era of riverboats. By the mid-19th century, America's great rivers were highways of commerce and culture. Steamboats carried passengers, cotton, and goods between plantations, towns, and cities. They were symbols of progress and wealth, floating palaces with chandeliers, carved woodwork, and brass fittings. But they were also vulnerable. Fire, storms, and boiler explosions made river travel dangerous. And when disaster struck on a river, escape was often impossible. The Eliza Battle was launched in 1852, a sidewheel steamer named after the wife of a prominent Alabama businessman. She was 200 feet long, fitted with elegant cabins and spacious decks, and capable of carrying both passengers and valuable cargo. By 1858, she was well known along the Tombigbee River, running between Columbus, Mississippi and Mobile, Alabama. She carried wealthy planters, their families, and most importantly, their cotton, the lifeblood of the Southern economy. The night of the fire. On the night of March 1, 1858, the Eliza Battle left Columbus with a heavy load, more than 1,200 bales of cotton and dozens of passengers. The weather was bitterly cold. As she steamed southward down the Tombigbee, a strong north wind blew across the decks. At about 2 a.m., as the vessel neared what is now Penitentiary Bend, fire broke out among the cotton bales. Within minutes, flames spread uncontrollably. Driven by the wind, the fire raced across the decks, devouring the vessel's superstructure. Chaos on the river, panic erupted. Passengers rushed from their cabins, many barely dressed in nightclothes against the freezing air. The fire spread so quickly that lifeboats could not be launched. Some leapt into the river, hoping to swim ashore, but the water was near freezing, and many succumbed to hypothermia. Others clung desperately to cotton bales thrown overboard, riding them like rafts downstream. Accounts describe the horrific sight of men, women, and children trapped between fire and water, their screams echoing through the night. Casualties by dawn, the Eliza Battle was a charred wreck, burned to her hull and sunk in the river. Of the roughly 100 passengers and crew, at least 33 people died, though some reports placed the toll higher. Most of the victims were from wealthy planter families, and the disaster shocked the South. Newspapers called it one of the worst river tragedies in Alabama's history. The ghost ship legend, yet the story did not end there. In the years that followed, locals along the Tombigbee began reporting strange sightings. On cold winter nights, some claimed to see a great steamboat ablaze, drifting silently along the river's bends. They said the flames glowed but did not consume, the burning boat passed without sound, only to fade into darkness. Others insisted they could hear faint music and voices, echoes of the passengers who perished in the fire. The phantom came to be known as the ghost of the Eliza Battle, and it became one of the South's most famous river legends. Why the legend endured? Several factors gave the Eliza Battle ghost story unusual staying power, a real tragedy. Unlike many ghost ships, the Eliza Battle was a documented disaster. Her loss was reported widely in newspapers. This gave the legend a foundation of fact. Dramatic imagery, a burning riverboat is unforgettable. Survivors described the flames lighting the sky for miles, turning the night into day. That imagery easily transformed into folklore. Local connection, for communities along the Tombigbee, the wreck was personal. Many knew the victims, and for decades the story was retold by families and river pilots. Seasonal pattern, witnesses often claimed the ghost ship appeared in late winter, near the anniversary of the disaster. This pattern gave the tale credibility among believers. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Eliza Battle stands apart from oceanic ghost ship tales like the Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was found intact but abandoned, her fate unknown. The Eliza Battle was destroyed in fire, her tragedy witnessed, but reborn in legend as a spectral image. She is more akin to ghost trains or haunted battlefields, where trauma imprints itself on a place, replaying in the imagination of those who live nearby. Historical investigations in the 20th century, historians studied the Eliza Battle to separate fact from folklore. They confirmed the 1858 fire, casualties, and wreck site. The hull still lies buried beneath the Tombigbee's muddy waters. As for the ghost sightings, skeptics suggest natural explanations, atmospheric illusions, light from distant fires or lanterns reflecting on mist. Folklore psychology, people primed by stories may interpret ordinary sights as supernatural. But believers insist the phantom is real, a spectral reenactment of Alabama's greatest river tragedy. Cultural impact. The Eliza Battle became part of Southern folklore. Local storytellers wove her tale into ghost tours and fireside legends. Folklorists recorded the sightings as examples of river ghost traditions. She was featured in books and articles about American ghost ships, often alongside oceanic legends. For people in Alabama and Mississippi, she became not just a tragedy, but a haunting reminder of the fragility of life on the river. Symbolism. The legend of the Eliza Battle resonates because it embodies themes of fire and water, two of humanity's most feared elements, united in disaster. Wealth and loss. The victims were among the South's most prominent families, reminding all that status offered no protection. Memory and haunting. The idea that trauma can leave a mark, replayed in spectral form for future generations. She became more than a burned ship, she became a symbol of fate, loss, and the river's power to hold the past. Reflection. The story of the Eliza battle is twofold: historical disaster, and a ghostly legend. One is fact, recorded in newspapers and survivor accounts. The other is folklore, whispered along the riverbanks and told on cold nights. Together, they remind us that ghost ships are not only found at sea. They can haunt rivers too, appearing when memory and imagination keep them alive. Perhaps the Eliza battle never truly drifts again. Perhaps the phantom flames are no more than mist and moonlight. But in the minds of those who live along the Tombigbee, she is still out there, a burning steamboat, forever trapped in her final voyage. A ghost ship not of the ocean, but of America's haunted rivers. The tragedy and ghost of HMS Eurydice. The sea has always been the stage of naval triumphs, and tragedies. Battles won, voyages charted, and discoveries made. But it has also claimed countless ships and lives, leaving behind legends of ghosts said to sail forever. Among Britain's many naval tragedies, one stands out not only for its scale but also for its lingering presence in folklore: the loss of HMS Eurydice, a training ship of the Royal Navy, which sank suddenly in 1878, drowning nearly all of her crew. In the decades since, sailors and islanders alike have reported seeing a phantom version of the Eurydice, sails full, gliding silently off the Isle of Wight. A real disaster gave birth to one of Britain's most enduring ghost ship legends. The vessel HMS Eurydice was launched in 1843 as a 26-gun frigate, part of the Royal Navy's global fleet. She saw service in the West Indies and Mediterranean, but as steam power rose to dominance, sailing frigates became obsolete for warfare. By the 1870s, the Royal Navy repurposed the Eurydice as a training vessel for young seamen. Stripped of most armaments, she carried cadets on long cruises to teach seamanship under sail. Her design was old-fashioned by then, but she remained a proud sight, a three-masted frigate with square-rigged sails, 145 feet long, a reminder of Britain's age of sail. The voyage in 1877, the Eurydice embarked on a long training voyage to the West Indies. She carried around 319 men, mostly young trainees, along with a small cadre of experienced officers. For months, the voyage went smoothly. The cadets gained practical experience, and the ship prepared to return home. By March 1878, the Eurydice was heading back toward England, spirits high as land drew near. On March 24, 1878, she approached the Isle of Wight, sailing under clear skies. Families waited along the coast to greet the vessel. What happened next turned anticipation into horror. The disaster without warning: a blizzard struck the Isle of Wight. Bitter cold winds swept across the sea, and snow blinded visibility. The Eurydice, with most of her sails set to catch the fair weather breeze, was caught completely off guard. The sudden gale filled her canvas with overwhelming force. Before the crew could react, the ship heeled violently. Water poured in through her open gun ports. In minutes, the Eurydice capsized and sank. Witnesses on shore saw her vanish beneath the storm, helpless to intervene. Casualties: the tragedy was immense. Of the 319 men aboard, only 2 survived. More than 300 young sailors drowned within sight of home. Bodies washed ashore for days afterward, carried by the tides. Many were buried in mass graves on the Isle of Wight. The disaster shocked Britain, raising questions about naval preparedness and the risks of using outdated sailing ships in unpredictable northern waters. Queen Victoria herself expressed sorrow, and the nation mourned. The ghost ship legend: as with so many tragedies, the story of the Eurydice did not end with her sinking. Soon after, locals and sailors began reporting strange sightings. On cold evenings near Shanklin and Sandown Bay, some claimed to see a 3-masted frigate appear suddenly, sails full in the wind. Witnesses described her as eerily silent, gliding across the water before vanishing into mist. Some insisted the ship looked exactly like the Eurydice, forever replaying her last approach. These stories spread, and the Eurydice became a classic British ghost ship, a phantom tied to real tragedy. Famous sightings: over the years, many sightings were reported. In the 1930s, sailors swore they saw her ghostly outline off the Isle of Wight. During World War II, pilots and naval crews reported glimpsing a frigate in waters where no ship should have been. Even into the 20th century, fishermen and locals claimed the phantom frigate still appeared in stormy weather. The most famous story came from Prince Edward, later King Edward VII, who reportedly saw the ghost ship while sailing in the area in the late 19th century. The tale, whether exaggerated or not, added royal weight to the legend. Why the legend endures? The Eurydice remains one of Britain's most remembered ghost ships because, historical tragedy, unlike myths such as the Flying Dutchman, the Eurydice's sinking was a real, well-documented event. Scale of loss, over 300 lives lost at once gave the story a weight of grief that still lingers. Proximity to land, the disaster happened within sight of shore, making it all the more haunting for witnesses. Symbolism, she represented the end of an era, a sailing frigate destroyed by a modern storm, caught between tradition and change. Skeptical explanations. Not everyone accepts the ghostly sightings. Skeptics suggest natural causes, optical illusions, sea fog and light refractions can create mirages, making distant ships appear ghostly. Emotional memory, the scale of the tragedy etched itself into local consciousness, people primed by the story may interpret ordinary sights as supernatural. Other vessels, similar silhouettes from naval training ships in later years could have been mistaken for the phantom. Still, these explanations never erased the legend from local belief. Cultural impact. The Eurydice left a mark on British culture, ballads and poems were written in her memory. Folklorists recorded ghost ship sightings around the Isle of Wight. The wreck itself was studied by divers, confirming details of her final moments. She became a cautionary tale in naval history, about preparedness, training, and the risks of outdated vessels. At the same time, she became part of maritime folklore, joining the Mary Celeste and Flying Dutchman as one of the sea's enduring mysteries. Reflection. The story of HMS Eurydice is twofold, a tragedy of young lives lost in 1878, within sight of home, to a storm that struck without warning. A legend of a phantom frigate, sailing forever in memory of the men who perished. The truth is that ghost ships endure not because we believe in phantoms, but because we believe in memory. A disaster of such scale leaves an imprint, on the people, the place, and even on the waters themselves. Perhaps the Eurydice is not truly seen, but remembered, a vision summoned from grief, replayed in mist and storm. Yet for those who swear they have seen her white sails glowing against the night sky, the Eurydice is not just history. She is still there, sailing silently, a ghost of Britain's naval past. The mystery of S.V. Resolven, the silent schooner. The late 19th century was an age of sail, when schooners and brigs carried trade across the North Atlantic. Many ships vanished to storms and ice, but some left behind mysteries that still puzzle historians today. One such case is the S.V. Resolven, a small merchant vessel from Britain. In August of 1884, she was discovered adrift off the coast of Newfoundland. She was in good condition, her cargo intact, her lamps still burning. Yet her crew of 10 and a single passenger were gone, vanished without a trace. The Resolven's silent decks made her one of the strangest ghost ship discoveries of her time. The vessel the Resolven was a 100-ton schooner registered in Britain. She was used for coastal and transatlantic trade, carrying timber, fish, and other goods between North America and the United Kingdom. Though small compared to the great clippers of her era, she was a sturdy vessel, with a crew of about 10 men commanded by a seasoned captain. Like many schooners of her day, she relied on the skill and discipline of her crew to keep her safe in often dangerous Atlantic waters. The voyage in late August of 1884, the Resolven was bound from Newfoundland to Swansea, Wales. Her cargo consisted of timber and oil, nothing unusual. On board were 10 crew members and 1 passenger, whose names were later recorded, though their fates remain unknown. She set out across the North Atlantic, a voyage that normally took weeks. But the Resolven would never reach her destination. The discovery on August 29, 1884, the steamer HMS Mallard spotted a schooner drifting near Baccalieu Island, off Newfoundland's coast. At first glance, she seemed intact. Her sails were ragged but still set. No distress signals flew from her masts. When sailors from the Mallard boarded her, they encountered an unsettling sight: the Resolven was completely deserted. Her cargo was untouched. The ship's lamps were still burning, suggesting recent abandonment. There were no signs of struggle or violence. The only damage noted was to her rigging and one small boat missing from its davits. It was as though the crew had calmly departed, but why? Immediate theories: naval officers puzzled over the situation. Several possibilities were considered: sudden emergency, perhaps the crew thought the ship was sinking. If water had begun flooding in, panic might have driven them to abandon ship in a small boat. Collision fear: some speculated that the Resolven may have collided with ice or debris. Believing her fatally damaged, the crew might have left, unaware she was still seaworthy. Illusion of danger: with lamps burning and sails ragged, the ship seemed recently deserted. A false impression of imminent disaster could explain a hasty abandonment. But there was no hole in her hull, no evidence of fire, and no storm reported in the area that day. The missing lifeboat: the absence of one small boat gave the strongest clue: the crew had left voluntarily. But this raises its own questions: why abandon a sound ship in calm seas? Where did they intend to go? Why was no trace of the lifeboat ever found? In the vastness of the Atlantic, a small boat could easily vanish, but the deliberate decision to leave remains baffling. Comparisons to the Mary Celeste: the case of the Resolven drew immediate comparisons to the more famous Mary Celeste, discovered adrift in 1872 with her crew missing. Both vessels were seaworthy, cargo intact, and abandonment inexplicable. But the Resolven had one difference: she was found much sooner after desertion. The burning lamps suggested her crew had left only hours before discovery. If true, rescuers had missed them by the narrowest margin. This nearness made the mystery even more haunting. Where had the men gone in those few hours? Later explanations: over the years, several theories have been suggested. 1. Fear of fire or explosion: the Resolven carried oil as part of her cargo. If fumes spread below deck, the crew might have feared an explosion and evacuated quickly. This would explain why they left a functioning ship, but there is no evidence of fire or damage from an oil flare. 2. Rogue wave or sudden squall: some speculate a sudden wave or gust could have injured the rigging and made the vessel unstable, convincing the captain to abandon her. Yet the seas were calm when she was found. 3. Crew dispute or mutiny: could violence or disagreement have caused the men to flee? The ship showed no signs of struggle, and if mutiny occurred, why abandon the vessel rather than seize her? 4. Ill-judged evacuation: the most accepted explanation is a simple miscalculation. Believing the ship fatally damaged, perhaps from a leak, shifting cargo, or fumes, the captain ordered evacuation. In reality, the Resolven was still sound, but by the time rescuers arrived, her crew was already lost at sea in the lifeboat. The fate of the crew: what became of the Resolven's missing 11 souls, remains unknown. No wreckage of the lifeboat was ever reported. No bodies were recovered. The Atlantic likely swallowed them quickly, leaving only the schooner behind as evidence. Their families in Britain and Newfoundland never received closure. The story was told in maritime circles as another cautionary tale of the sea's mysteries. Why the story endures: the Resolven continues to fascinate because she embodies the perfect ghost ship image: lamps still glowing, cargo untouched, ship seaworthy, crew vanished without explanation. She was a real vessel, found by a naval ship, documented and confirmed. And yet, like the Mary Celeste, she leaves only questions. Legacy: today, the Resolven is less famous than the Mary Celeste, but historians often link the two as examples of ghost ship lore from the 19th century. She represents not just mystery, but the razor's edge between safety and disaster in seafaring life. One wrong judgment, one misinterpreted danger, could send an entire crew to their deaths, even as their vessel sailed on without them. Reflection: the story of the Resolven is at once tragic and eerie. A small schooner, found adrift, still lit as though her crew had just stepped away. Yet those men were never seen again. Perhaps they panicked at a false alarm. Perhaps they faced something we cannot reconstruct. Whatever the truth, the Resolvent teaches us that the sea does not need storms or pirates to claim lives. Sometimes, uncertainty itself is fatal. And so she sails on in Maritime memory, another ghost ship of the Atlantic, a vessel without her crew, carrying only questions across the waves. The ghost ship Sabrina, silent barge of the Channel. In October 1917, the English Channel was one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the world. German U-boats prowled the coastlines, sinking ships with torpedoes or by boarding and scuttling them. Merchant vessels were frequent targets, and every voyage was a gamble with death. In the midst of this chaos, a small sailing barge named the Sabrina set out on a short, routine voyage. She was seen leaving port with her crew aboard. 2 days later, she was found aground on the coast of France. Her sails were set, her decks empty, her cargo intact. Her crew of 5 had vanished without explanation. The Sabrina became one of the most unsettling ghost ship mysteries of the First World War, a tiny vessel caught in a storm of global conflict, and still remembered for the silence she left behind. The vessel the Sabrina was a 2-masted sailing barge, built in 1873. At just 189 tons, she was small compared to larger merchant ships of the time, but she was practical, used mainly for carrying coal, ore, and other short-haul cargo across the English Channel and along the coastlines of Britain and France. Her home port was Falmouth, England, and by 1917 she had been in service for more than 40 years. Despite her age, she was still sound and seaworthy, manned by a small crew of just 5 men. The voyage on October 15, 1917, the Sabrina departed Falmouth with a cargo of coal, bound for St. Brook in Brittany, France. The route was familiar and relatively short. But these were not ordinary times. The English Channel was an active war zone, with German U-boats lying in wait for merchant ships. Even small vessels like the Sabrina were at risk. Nevertheless, her crew sailed confidently. No distress signal was sent, no message of trouble received. She simply left port, and then disappeared from human sight. The discovery 2 days later, on October 17, 1917, the Sabrina was discovered aground near Rosal Point, on the French coast. At first glance, she appeared perfectly intact, her sails were set. Her cargo of coal was undisturbed. There were no signs of damage, shellfire, or explosion. No struggle or bloodstains were found on deck. But her crew of 5 had vanished completely. No bodies were found on board. No lifeboat had been launched. It was as though the men had simply stepped off the vessel and disappeared into thin air. Theories. The mystery of the Sabrina's crew quickly drew attention, and several theories emerged. 1. U-boat encounter. The most widely accepted theory is that a German U-boat intercepted the Sabrina. During World War I, U-boats often stopped smaller vessels, ordering crews into lifeboats before scuttling or abandoning the ship. But in this case, the Sabrina was not sunk. Why would the U-boat leave her intact? One possibility is that the submarine was interrupted before it could finish the job, leaving the crew prisoners and the vessel drifting. Another is that the Germans removed the men, intending to sink the ship later, but were forced to withdraw. This would explain the missing crew, but it raises further questions. No U-boat report has ever confirmed such an incident, and the men were never seen again. 2. Abandonment under false alarm. Another theory is that the crew believed they were under attack, perhaps mistaking a periscope sighting, or even imagining danger in tense wartime conditions. In panic, they may have abandoned ship. If their small boat capsized in the channel, they would have quickly been lost. This theory is plausible but difficult to prove. The intact condition of the Sabrina suggests there was no actual attack, but fear alone might have been enough to drive the men to flee. 3. Sudden accident. Could the crew have been swept overboard during maneuvering, one by one, until no one remained to control the vessel? While possible, the odds of all 5 men being lost this way in calm weather seem slim. 4. Deliberate capture. Some have suggested that the men were taken by German forces for interrogation or imprisonment, and their fate lost in wartime chaos. Records of missing merchant sailors exist, but none clearly matched the Sabrina's crew. Why the mystery endures. The Sabrina became a classic ghost ship story because of her haunting details: a ship found intact, with her sails set and cargo aboard. A wartime setting where danger lurked everywhere. A crew vanished without a trace, leaving no evidence of what happened. Unlike storm wrecks or naval battles, the Sabrina offered no explanation, only silence. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Sabrina is often mentioned alongside the Mary Celeste of 1872. Both were found seaworthy, cargo untouched, and crew gone. But while the Mary Celeste remains shrouded in speculation, the Sabrina's context makes her story even more chilling. She vanished during a war where enemy submarines stalked the seas. Her disappearance was not only mysterious but also symbolic, a small ship swallowed not by the ocean itself, but by the shadow of global conflict. The human side. The 5 men aboard the Sabrina were ordinary merchant sailors, part of the unsung workforce that kept wartime supply lines alive. Their names are less remembered than their vessel, but their fate is no less tragic. Whether captured, drowned, or lost to panic, they never returned home. Their families received no explanation, only the eerie detail that their ship had been found perfectly sound. Legacy. The Sabrina was eventually salvaged and returned to service. She continued working as a humble cargo vessel for years afterward. But her name remained tied forever to the ghostly events of 1917. For maritime historians, she is a reminder of the risks faced by civilian sailors during wartime. For storytellers, she is one of the great ghost ship legends of the 20th century. Reflection. The mystery of the Sabrina is a story of war, fear, and the unknown. Perhaps her crew were taken by a U-boat, their fate erased in silence. Perhaps they abandoned ship in panic, only to perish in the cold waters of the Channel. What remains is the image of a schooner aground on the French coast, sails full, cargo intact, yet utterly deserted. A ship that seems alive, but is only an empty shell. The Sabrina is not just a ghost ship of the past. She is a reminder that even in the modern age, with records and reports, the sea can still keep its secrets. And like so many ghost ships before her, she sails on, not across the Channel, but through the imagination, as one of the quiet mysteries of the Great War. The mystery of the SV Marlborough, ghost ship of the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean, stretching between New Zealand, South America, and the frozen wastes of Antarctica, has always been among the most dangerous seas in the world. Winds scream endlessly across the latitudes known as the Roaring Forties and Furious Fifties. Waves rise like cliffs. Ships vanish there, swallowed without explanation. One such ship was the SV Marlborough, a full-rigged vessel from Glasgow, Scotland. She disappeared in 1890, carrying more than 30 people. For decades, no word came. But years later, reports surfaced of a ghostly hulk sighted near Cape Horn, a vessel adrift, her sails rotting, her crew reduced to skeletons still at their stations. Fact or legend, the Marlborough remains one of the most haunting maritime mysteries of the South Pacific. The vessel the Marlborough was a full-rigged iron sailing ship built in 1876 in Glasgow. At 1,300 tons, she was large and sturdy, designed for long voyages between Britain and New Zealand. Like many ships of her time, she carried both cargo and passengers. By the 1890s, steamships were beginning to replace sail, but vessels like the Marlborough still plied the emigrant routes, carrying goods and settlers across vast oceans. The final voyage on January 11, 1890, the Marlborough departed Lyttelton, New Zealand, bound for London. On board were 29 crew members, mostly British. 7 passengers, including families returning home. A cargo of frozen mutton and other produce. Her master was Captain Hurd, an experienced sailor. The voyage was expected to take around 3 months, rounding Cape Horn and crossing the Atlantic to Europe. But the Marlborough never arrived. The disappearance as weeks turned to months, no word came from the Marlborough. Shipping companies and families grew anxious. But the South Pacific was vast, and delays were common. It wasn't until more than a year later that she was officially listed as missing. With no wreckage, no survivors, and no reports of sighting, her fate was left to speculation. Some believed she had been overwhelmed by storms near Cape Horn, where countless ships had gone down. Others thought she may have struck ice or run aground on an uncharted island. For decades, the Marlborough was remembered simply as another ship lost to the sea. The ghost ship reports then, years later, strange reports emerged. In 1913, a story circulated that a British steamship had sighted an abandoned vessel in the waters near Cape Horn. Approaching closer, sailors recognized the ship's name still visible on her hull, Marlborough of Glasgow. According to the tale, the vessel was intact but derelict. Her sails hung in tatters. On deck and below, the crew were still at their stations, but they were long dead, reduced to skeletons preserved by the cold southern winds. The steamship did not attempt to tow or salvage the vessel, fearing danger in the stormy seas. Instead, they reported the sighting upon their return. The story spread quickly, turning the Marlborough into a maritime ghost ship legend. Could it be true? If true, this would mean the Marlborough had drifted for over 20 years, preserved by the harsh climate of the Southern Ocean. But is such a thing possible? Maritime experts remain skeptical. Ships left unattended usually break apart within years, battered by storms and waves. The idea of a fully intact vessel drifting for 2 decades stretches credibility. Yet, some aspects are not entirely impossible. The cold waters of the Southern Ocean can preserve bodies and timber remarkably well, slowing decay. Other derelict ships have been known to drift for years before finally vanishing. Still, no physical evidence of the Marlborough has ever been found. Several theories attempt to explain the fate of the Marlborough. 1. Sinking without trace. The most likely scenario is that she sank soon after leaving New Zealand. A sudden storm, iceberg, or rogue wave could have overwhelmed her before any sighting was possible. 2. Foundering near Cape Horn. It is possible she was lost while attempting to round Cape Horn, a notorious graveyard of ships. High winds and currents there often sank sailing vessels. 3. The ghost ship legend. The 1913 report may have been exaggerated or entirely invented. Newspapers of the time were prone to sensational stories, and the tale of a skeleton-crewed ghost ship was irresistible to readers. 4. Partial truth. Some suggest a derelict ship was found near Cape Horn, but it may not have been the Marlborough. Over time, retellings may have attached her name to the legend, giving the story a more dramatic twist. Why the story haunts us. The Marlborough remains captivating because her supposed ghost ship sighting came 2 decades after her disappearance. The image is unforgettable, a bark drifting silently through fog. Sails in tatters, timbers creaking. Skeleton still in place, as if frozen in time. This imagery fits perfectly into the archetype of a ghost ship, a vessel suspended between life and death, time and eternity. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Marlborough is often compared to the Mary Celeste, 1872, found intact but abandoned, her crew missing. The Bachimo, 1931, left adrift in the Arctic, sighted for decades after. The Octavius, legend, said to have been found frozen with her crew dead at their posts. Unlike the Mary Celeste, the Marlborough was never physically recovered. Unlike the Bachimo, her sightings are only anecdotal. This makes her a hybrid of fact and legend, a ship lost to history but kept alive by story. Legacy. The Marlborough's legend became part of maritime folklore in New Zealand, Britain, and South America. For sailors rounding Cape Horn, the thought of her phantom hulk drifting somewhere nearby was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Historians continue to debate whether the 1913 report was true, mistaken identity, or myth. But the Marlborough's place in ghost ship lore is secure. She represents both the dangers of the sea and the way the human mind fills mystery with story. Reflection. The fate of the Marlborough may never be known. Perhaps she lies shattered on the seabed near Cape Horn. Perhaps she drifted longer than anyone realized. Or perhaps she never reappeared at all, except in the imagination of sailors and storytellers. But her story endures because it captures the essence of maritime mystery, a ship that set out full of life, vanishing into silence, only to re-emerge years later as a specter of death. Whether real or myth, the Marlborough remains one of the most haunting ghost ship tales of the Southern Hemisphere. The mystery of Belle Amica, the modern ghost ship of Sardinia. For centuries, ghost ship stories have haunted sailors' imaginations, tales of vessels found adrift, intact, but without a living soul aboard. Most of those stories belong to the distant past, when communication was slow and the seas vast. But in August 2006, off the coast of Sardinia, Italy, the age-old mystery returned. A sleek schooner, unfamiliar to authorities, was found drifting silently near the shore. On board, food and maps lay scattered. A half-eaten meal sat in a galley. And yet, there was no sign of her crew. The ship carried no flag, no papers, and no obvious history. Painted on her stern was only one name, Belle Amica. The story begins on the evening of August 24, 2006, near Punta Volpe, on Sardinia's northern coast. Italian Coast Guard spotted a vessel adrift in calm waters. She was a schooner, around 20 meters long, built in classic style but modern in construction. Strangely, she was drifting unmanned, her sails loosely set. There was no sign of distress, no mayday call. When officials boarded, the mystery deepened. The scene on board, what they found echoed the most famous ghost ship legends: no crew, the vessel was completely deserted. No flag or documents, nothing to identify ownership. Personal effects, clothes, books, and items of daily life remained scattered in the cabins. Half-eaten food, in the galley, a meal had been left unfinished, as though the crew had left in sudden haste. Nautical charts, maps of the North African coast were found, suggesting a wider voyage than local waters. It was a modern Mary Celeste moment, a ship that looked recently lived in, but with no explanation for its abandonment. Naming the vessel painted discreetly on her stern was a single name, Belle Amica, Italian for beautiful friend. The name was not listed in any official registry of yachts or merchant vessels. For Italian authorities, this was highly unusual. Every legal ship must be registered under international maritime law. The Belle Amica appeared, at first, to have no history at all. Theories begin. News of the discovery spread quickly across Europe. How could a modern schooner, with food still warm and belongings intact, simply appear off Sardinia with no crew? Several theories were considered. 1. Smuggling. Authorities speculated the vessel may have been used for smuggling, possibly cigarettes, alcohol, or even human trafficking. The absence of registration and documents fit this idea. But no contraband was found aboard. 2. Illegal charter. Another possibility was that she was being used as a private charter, outside of regulation. If her crew abandoned ship to avoid fines or criminal charges, it might explain their disappearance. 3. Sudden emergency. Could the crew have fled in panic, perhaps fearing fire, collision, or pursuit? The food left behind suggested haste. But why leave a perfectly seaworthy vessel so close to shore? 4. Romantic mystery. Some pointed to the name, Belle Amica, and speculated it was a luxury yacht abandoned in strange circumstances. The story captured imaginations across Italy, with headlines calling her a modern ghost ship. The truth emerges weeks later. The mystery took a surprising turn. Investigators traced the vessel to a wealthy Italian businessman from Naples. He admitted ownership of the Belle Amica and explained that she had not been stolen or lost at sea. According to him, the yacht had been anchored off Sardinia during a family holiday. When he and his relatives went ashore unexpectedly, strong winds caused the vessel to drift. By the time Coast Guards discovered her, she had floated far from her mooring, giving the false appearance of abandonment. The half-eaten meal, he claimed, was simply the family's lunch, left behind when they disembarked. Why the legend stuck on the surface? This explanation seems simple. Yet the story of the Belle Amica refused to fade. Why? Because so many details echoed the archetype of ghost ships, the vessel drifting silently, seemingly ownerless. The lack of flag and documents, raising questions of secrecy. The meal left behind, a classic hallmark of sudden disappearance. The romantic name, beautiful friend, lending the story an eerie poetry. Even with an owner identified, the Belle Amica felt different. Too mysterious. Too cinematic. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Belle Amica is often compared to earlier ghost ship legends. Mary Celeste, 1872, found intact, meals left unfinished, crew missing. SV Resolven, 1884, discovered with lamps still burning, but crew vanished. Kaz 2, 2007, a modern yacht in Australia, found drifting with its crew gone. The difference is that the Belle Amica was found in modern times, when ship tracking and records should prevent such mysteries. And unlike the Mary Celeste, this case had an identified owner, yet the myth remains stronger than the mundane truth. Symbolism of the Belle Amica. The Belle Amica fascinates not because of what actually happened, but because of what she represents, the persistence of mystery in the modern age. The allure of a ship adrift, meals unfinished, as though frozen in time. The way legend can grow from coincidence, transforming an accident into a ghost story. Her story proves that even in the 21st century, when satellites map the oceans and radio tracks every voyage, the old myths of the sea can return in an instant. Reflection. The case of the Belle Amica is not a supernatural ghost story, nor even a tragic one. No lives were lost, no crime proven. Instead, it is a reminder of how quickly the imagination fills gaps when a vessel appears adrift without explanation. For a brief time in 2006, the Belle Amica was the Mary Celeste of the Mediterranean, a phantom yacht found in silence, her name alone suggesting secrets. Even after the truth was revealed, the story lingers. Because in the end, ghost ships do not always need death or disaster. Sometimes, all it takes is an empty deck, a drifting hull, and the timeless human question, where did they go? The mystery of SV Gloriana, the vanishing schooner of the Pacific. For centuries, the world's oceans have swallowed ships whole, leaving behind wreckage, tragedy, and silence. But sometimes, instead of vanishing, a ship is left behind, intact, adrift, and abandoned, with no trace of her crew. One such case unfolded in the closing years of the 19th century, far from the shipping lanes of Europe. In 1896, the American schooner SV Gloriana was discovered drifting in the Pacific Ocean. She was seaworthy. Her cargo was intact. Yet the men who sailed her were gone, vanished into thin air. The Gloriana's story never reached the fame of the Mary Celeste, but it remains one of the Pacific's most haunting maritime puzzles. The vessel the Gloriana was a two-masted schooner of about 80 tons, built in the United States during the late 1800s. She was small compared to deep-sea clippers, but perfectly suited to regional trade in the Pacific, hauling lumber, supplies, and general cargo between the West Coast, Hawaii, and smaller island ports. Schooners like her were the workhorses of the Pacific, manned by small crews of a half-dozen or so. Sturdy, economical, and versatile, they were the backbone of coastal commerce. The Gloriana was such a vessel, ordinary, hard-working, and dependable. The voyage in the summer of 1896, the Gloriana sailed from San Francisco on a routine voyage. Reports suggest she was carrying general goods, possibly bound for Hawaii or Pacific Island ports. Her exact manifest is uncertain, but nothing unusual was noted. She had aboard a small crew, led by an experienced captain. For them, the journey should have been uneventful. Instead, it became a mystery. The discovery later that year, the Gloriana was sighted adrift in the Pacific. Accounts vary on who first found her. Some sources say another merchant vessel, others suggest a naval ship. What is consistent is the scene described when men boarded her. The ship was completely deserted. Her cargo and stores were intact. Her hull was sound and seaworthy. The sails were set, though ragged, as though the ship had drifted without guidance. There were no signs of struggle, violence, or fire. She was a ghost ship, her decks silent, as though her crew had simply stepped off the vessel and vanished. What happened to the crew? The mystery of the Gloriana lies entirely in the absence of her people. With no distress signals, no lifeboat launches confirmed, and no bodies found, speculation quickly spread. Several theories were suggested at the time, and remain debated even now. 1. Sudden accident. One theory holds that the crew may have been swept overboard during a maneuver. In rough seas, handling sails could be deadly. If several men were lost, the remaining crew might have tried to rescue them, only for all to perish. But this does not explain why the ship was left entirely unmanned, unless every single sailor, one by one, met the same fate. 2. Abandonment after illusion of danger. Another possibility is that the captain and crew believed the ship was sinking, perhaps mistaking a shift in cargo, a leak, or even gas buildup in the hold as signs of imminent disaster. They may have abandoned ship in a small boat, only for the Gloriana to remain afloat after all. This mirrors theories for the Mary Celeste. The problem: no wreckage of a lifeboat was ever reported. 3. Piracy. Some speculated that pirates or raiders may have boarded, killed or captured the crew, and then left the ship adrift. But the cargo was untouched. If piracy were the motive, why leave valuable goods behind? 4. Mutiny or violence. It is possible a fight broke out among the small crew, leading to disaster. If men fled in the lifeboat, or if bodies were disposed of at sea, the abandoned ship would remain. Yet again, no evidence of blood or struggle was ever reported. 5. The unknown. Like many ghost ship cases, the truth may simply never be known. A chain of small accidents, panic, and misjudgment could have ended in the schooner's abandonment, with no survivors left to tell the tale. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Gloriana's story echoes other famous maritime mysteries. Mary Celeste, 1872, found adrift with cargo intact, crew vanished. Resolven, 1884, discovered with lamps burning, but crew gone. Sabrina, 1917, World War I schooner found grounded with no men aboard. All share the same eerie pattern: a ship without her sailors, intact but inexplicable. The Gloriana is the Pacific's version of this classic ghost ship theme. Historical context. By the late 19th century, such stories gained wide attention. Newspapers reported ghost ship discoveries eagerly, often adding dramatic details. It is possible the Gloriana's abandonment was prosaic, an accident, a storm, or a miscalculation. But the fact that she was found seaworthy, with cargo and rigging intact, transformed her into a legend. For sailors of the Pacific trade, her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that the ocean could erase entire crews without a sound. Why the legend endures. The Gloriana endures in ghost ship lore for the same reasons as the Mary Celeste: the eerie silence of an intact vessel without people. The sense that abandonment came suddenly, with no preparation. The impossibility of answers, only speculation. She reminds us of the fragility of small schooners against the vastness of the Pacific. Reflection. The Gloriana was not a grand liner or a mighty battleship. She was a small workhorse of trade, manned by a handful of ordinary sailors. Their loss did not make international headlines like larger disasters. Yet the mystery of their vanishing remains just as chilling. Her silent discovery in 1896 captures the essence of the ghost ship phenomenon: vessels that are not wrecked, not destroyed, but abandoned in ways that defy logic. Perhaps her crew fell victim to accident, misjudgment, or forces we will never understand. Whatever the truth, the Gloriana continues to drift through history as a phantom, a schooner whose sails once carried men across the Pacific, and whose empty decks now carry only questions. A true ghost ship of the age of sail. The tragedy and ghost of S.V. Margaret Alwell, Lake Erie's lost schooner. The Great Lakes of North America are sometimes called the inland seas. Vast, unpredictable, and storm-swept, they have claimed thousands of ships and lives over the centuries. Among the many wrecks of Lake Erie, one stands out, not only for the tragedy of her loss, but for the ghostly legend that followed. She was the S.V. Margaret Alwell, a schooner barge that went down in 1899, drowning her captain, his family, and most of her crew. Today, she is remembered both as a cautionary tale of Great Lake storms, and as a ghost ship said to still haunt the waters where she sank. The vessel, the Margaret Alwell, was a wooden schooner barge, built in 1887 at Cleveland, Ohio. She was designed primarily for the stone trade, hauling limestone from quarries on Kelly's Island to cities along the Ohio shoreline. At just under 200 feet long, she was typical of the utilitarian barges of the lakes, sturdy, plain, and manned by small crews. Often, she worked in tandem with a tug, transporting bulk cargo vital to the booming cities of the Midwest. Though not glamorous, ships like the Allwill were the lifeblood of the region's industry. The final voyage on June 28, 1899, the Margaret Allwill departed Kelly's Island with a heavy load of limestone, bound for Cleveland. On board were Captain William Kelly, her master, his wife and child, who were traveling with him, about a dozen crew members. The weather that evening was unsettled. Reports indicate the barometer was falling, and storms were predicted across the lake. But in the world of commerce, schedules were tight, and risks often taken. Captain Kelly decided to proceed. It was a decision that would prove fatal. The storm as the Allwill crossed Lake Erie, a violent storm struck. Fierce winds whipped across the lake, raising waves as high as 20 feet. Rain and lightning lashed the schooner. The vessel began to founder. Her cargo of limestone, improperly trimmed in her hold, shifted dangerously, causing her to list. The crew fought desperately to keep her upright, but the storm was too powerful. Near Lorain, Ohio, the Margaret Allwill rolled and sank into the raging waters. Casualties of the roughly 12 to 13 people aboard, only 8 survived. At least 7 lives were lost, including Captain Kelly, his wife, and their young child. Survivors clung to wreckage for hours before being rescued by passing vessels. Their testimony painted a grim picture of chaos, cargo shifting, the captain struggling at the wheel, his wife refusing to leave his side, and sailors hurled into the black water as the ship went down. The wreck claimed not just lives, but an entire family, making the tragedy deeply personal for the Great Lakes community. The aftermath news of the sinking spread quickly. Newspapers across Ohio reported the disaster, highlighting the sorrow of Captain Kelly's family dying together. The loss of the Allwill also reignited debates about safety regulations, cargo loading practices, and the risks captains were pressured to take in the competitive limestone trade. But even as the facts were recorded, whispers began to circulate. Fishermen and sailors started telling stories of strange sightings in the years that followed. The ghost ship legend. According to local legend, the Margaret Allwill did not vanish entirely. For decades after 1899, sailors reported seeing a schooner on stormy nights near Lorain, sailing low in the water as if burdened by stone. Witnesses claimed her decks appeared empty, her sails in tatters, and her outline glowing faintly against the darkness. Others said they heard voices, the shouts of men in distress, or the cries of a woman, carried across the waves during gales. These stories gave the Allwill a place among Great Lakes ghost ships, a spectral reminder of the storm that claimed her. Theories and skepticism. Of course, skeptics argue that these sightings were exaggerations or misinterpretations. Storm mirages, atmospheric refractions on the water can make distant ships appear ghostly or distorted. Memory and folklore, with the tragedy so deeply felt, sailors may have been primed to see signs of the lost schooner during storms. Natural sounds, the wind through rigging and waves striking hulls can sound like cries or voices in the night. But for believers, the legend persists. They say the Margaret Allwill still sails Lake Erie in spectral form, forever trying to reach Cleveland with her doomed cargo. The wreck site. Unlike many Great Lakes ghost ships, the wreck of the Margaret Allwill has not been conclusively located. Lake Erie's shallow depths and shifting sediments make shipwreck hunting difficult, and wooden schooner barges deteriorated quickly compared to iron-hulled vessels. Some divers claim to have found remains consistent with the Allwill, but no definitive identification has been made. This uncertainty adds fuel to her legend. A ship without a grave is free to haunt the living waters. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The Margaret Allwill shares traits with other famous ghost ship tales. Like the Eliza battle in Alabama, she was a riverine vessel turned ghost legend after a fiery tragedy. Like the Mary Celeste, her story carries the eerie sense of lives cut short without clear explanation. Like many Great Lakes wrecks, the Edmund Fitzgerald, the Western Reserve, she is remembered not just as a wreck, but as a symbol of the lake's merciless power. But what sets her apart is the intimate detail: a captain, his wife, and child perishing together, their ship becoming a phantom in local lore. Legacy today, the story of the Margaret Allwell is part of Lake Erie's maritime history. She is included in books and ghost ship anthologies, often mentioned in connection with Ohio's haunted waters. Local historians still tell her tale, keeping alive the memory of those lost. And for sailors, her ghost ship reputation remains a quiet warning that the Great Lakes, however familiar, can still be deadly. Reflection: the Margaret Allwell was not a mighty ocean liner or famous naval frigate. She was a working barge, ordinary in every way, until her final voyage. Her loss in 1899 turned her from a humble schooner into a ghost ship of legend, remembered for the family who died aboard her, the storm that sank her, and the spectral sightings that followed. Whether her phantom sails truly appear in stormy gales, or whether the legend is only a projection of grief and memory, her story endures. On Lake Erie, where thousands of ships have gone down, the Margaret Allwell sails still, a ghost ship of stone and sorrow, forever bound to the storm that claimed her. The mystery of SV Ocean Wave, phantom schooner of Lake Erie. The Great Lakes have been called the graveyard of ships. Thousands of schooners, steamers, and barges have gone down in their waters since the 19th century. Storms rise without warning, waves strike like ocean surf, and winter ice crushes hulls. Among these lost vessels is one that became more than a wreck. She became a legend. The SV Ocean Wave, a small schooner trading on Lake Erie, sank in the mid-19th century. But sailors say she still sails, appearing as a phantom on stormy nights, her outline glowing against the waves. Her story blends tragedy with haunting folklore, making her one of the Great Lakes' classic ghost ships. The vessel the Ocean Wave was a modest two-masted schooner, typical of her time. In the 1850s and 60s, vessels like her crowded Lake Erie, carrying lumber, coal, grain, and passengers between ports in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ontario. She was not remarkable in size or design. But like so many working ships of the lakes, she was vital to the growing commerce of America's Midwest. Crewed by a handful of sailors, she represented both livelihood and risk. The final voyage details of the Ocean Wave's last voyage are fragmentary, as records from that era are incomplete. What is known is that she was sailing on Lake Erie in the early 1860s, likely carrying a cargo of timber or stone. Some accounts place her near Cleveland when a storm struck. Others say she was closer to the islands of the Western Basin. What all reports agree upon is that she encountered violent weather and never returned. Her crew, thought to number between 6 and 8 men, were lost with her. No bodies were ever recovered. The loss: unlike some Great Lakes wrecks, the Ocean Wave left no dramatic newspaper accounts or survivor testimonies. Instead, her disappearance was recorded quietly, as another casualty of the storm season. But her memory lived on among local sailors. They told stories of seeing her after her loss, appearing when gales swept Lake Erie. These tales soon elevated her from tragedy to ghost ship. The ghost ship legend: for decades after her sinking, fishermen and lake captains claimed to see a phantom schooner riding the waves during storms. Witnesses described her as a two-masted vessel, sails torn but still driving forward. Some said she glowed faintly, a pale silhouette against lightning-lit skies. Others reported hearing voices carried by the wind, cries of men struggling at the pumps or calling for help. The ship was identified as the Ocean Wave, the schooner lost years earlier. Her legend became tied to storm lore, a spectral warning of Lake Erie's dangers. Comparisons to other ghost ships: the Ocean Wave's story echoes other maritime legends. Like the Eliza Battle of Alabama's Tombigbee River, she is said to reappear in flames or stormlight, a phantom reminder of disaster. Like the Flying Dutchman, her ghostly form is seen as a harbinger of bad weather. Like the Mary Celeste, she reminds us of how ships can become symbols, not just wrecks. But what sets the Ocean Wave apart is her Great Lakes home. Unlike ocean-going legends, she haunts an inland sea, a place where thousands of ordinary men sailed, and where folklore is deeply tied to local identity. Skeptical explanations. Not everyone believes in the ghost schooner. Skeptics suggest optical illusions. The Great Lakes are prone to mirages, caused by temperature inversions. Distant vessels can appear ghostly, floating above the water. Memory and suggestion. After hearing stories of the ocean wave, sailors may have interpreted ordinary ships in storms as the phantom schooner. Atmospheric effects. Lightning, fog, and spray can distort vision, especially in the chaos of gales. Yet, even with explanations, the legend persists. Why the legend endures. The ocean wave continues to be told in Great Lakes lore for several reasons. Her name, Ocean Wave, was poetic and evocative, lending itself to story. Even though she sailed on a lake, her name connected her to the sea's great mysteries. Her era, the mid-19th century, was a golden age of ghost ship tales. The Mary Celeste, the Octavius, and other legends were spreading worldwide, and the lakes embraced their own. The Great Lakes culture. For the fishing villages and port towns along Lake Erie, ghost ship stories were more than entertainment. They were warnings, moral lessons, and cultural touchstones. The wreck today. The exact wreck site of the ocean wave has never been definitively located. Lake Erie's shifting sands and heavy shipping traffic make archaeological confirmation difficult. But divers and historians continue to search, and local museums keep her story alive. In maritime folklore collections, she is consistently listed among the Great Lakes' most enduring phantom ships. Symbolism. The ocean wave represents more than just one lost schooner. She embodies the suddenness of storms on the Great Lakes, where ships could vanish in hours. The permanence of memory, as local people turn tragedy into legend. The human need for story, to explain the unexplained and to give voice to loss. In this way, the ocean wave sails on not only in folklore but in the cultural identity of Lake Erie. Reflection. The ocean wave was a small vessel, ordinary in design, crewed by working sailors whose names are now forgotten. But her legend outlived them all. Her ghost ship story continues to be told because it captures the essence of mystery, a schooner vanishing in a storm, returning only as a phantom of wind and wave. Perhaps the sightings are illusions, born of weather and imagination. Or perhaps the ocean wave truly sails still, bound forever to the lake that claimed her. Either way, she remains one of the Great Lakes' most enduring maritime mysteries, a humble schooner transformed into a timeless ghost ship. The mystery of the Rosalie, the abandoned French brig in the age of sail. Ghost ship stories captured imaginations across Europe and America. The most famous remains the Mary Celeste, but decades before her discovery, another vessel set the stage. In 1840, the French brig Rosalie was found drifting silently in the Atlantic, near the Bahamas. She was in good condition. Her sails were set. Her cargo was untouched. Yet her captain, crew, and passengers had vanished completely. The Rosalie's story, though less remembered today, was one of the earliest widely reported ghost ship mysteries of the 19th century, a tale that foreshadowed the enduring fascination with ships found empty at sea. The vessel the Rosalie was a French brig, a two-masted, square-rigged sailing vessel common in the early 19th century. Ships like her were versatile, used for trade across the Atlantic, carrying cargo and sometimes passengers between Europe, the Caribbean, and the Americas. While not a large or famous ship, she represented the lifeline of commerce in that era. Dozens of similar brigs crossed the ocean each year, relying on wind, skill, and luck to complete their voyages. The voyage in early 1840, the Rosalie departed Hamburg, Germany, bound for Havana, Cuba. She carried a cargo of general goods and, reportedly, at least one passenger along with her French crew. The transatlantic route was well traveled, but also dangerous. Hurricanes, calms, and currents could delay ships for weeks. Yet by summer of that year, the Rosalie was spotted in waters where she should not have been. The discovery on September 27, 1840, the English brig Queen of the Ocean encountered a vessel drifting near the island of Eleuthera in the Bahamas. Closing in, sailors recognized her as the French brig Rosalie. What they found was deeply unsettling: no crew or passengers, the ship was deserted. Sails still set, though somewhat ragged, the ship was under wind. Cargo intact, her holds were full, showing no sign of theft or piracy. Cabins in order, personal belongings were still in place. Animals still aboard, some reports say livestock, such as canaries or a cat, were found alive, though weak from neglect. She was a ghost ship, perfectly seaworthy but utterly empty of people. Early theories. The discovery of the Rosalie raised immediate questions. How could an entire crew and passenger vanish, leaving the ship unharmed? Several theories were considered in the 1840s. 1. Disease outbreak. Some suggested the crew may have been stricken by illness, cholera or yellow fever, both common in the Caribbean. Fearing infection, survivors might have abandoned ship in a small boat, only to perish at sea. 2. Piracy. The Bahamas had long been associated with piracy. Perhaps raiders forced the crew into boats or killed them, leaving the vessel adrift. But with the cargo untouched, this explanation never fit neatly. 3. Mutiny or violence. Could a mutiny have erupted, ending with abandonment? Again, the lack of signs of struggle argued against it. 4. Navigation error and abandonment. Another theory is that the crew believed the vessel in danger, perhaps thinking she had sprung a leak or was running aground, and left prematurely. But the Rosalie was sound when found. Comparisons to the Mary Celeste. The Rosalie's discovery foreshadowed the later and more famous case of the Mary Celeste, 1872. Both ships were found adrift and seaworthy. Abandoned without clear cause. Left with cargo and supplies intact. Destined to become enduring maritime puzzles. The Mary Celeste overshadowed the Rosalie in later memory, but in 1840, the French brig was one of the most sensational ghost ship tales in circulation. The aftermath. After her discovery, the Rosalie was taken under tow and brought into Nassau, Bahamas. Local authorities examined her but found no definitive clues. Her name faded from headlines after a few months, but not from maritime lore. Ghost ship collections of the 19th and early 20th centuries regularly cited her as an example of mysterious abandonments. Skeptical views. Modern historians caution that some details of the Rosalie may have been exaggerated. Newspaper accounts of the time often blended fact with speculation to captivate readers. Some question whether livestock were truly found aboard, or whether disease was ever a real possibility. Still, the essential fact remains: the Rosalie was a real vessel, documented as found deserted in 1840. That alone is enough to sustain her place in ghost ship history. Why the story haunts us. The Rosalie endures for several reasons. 1. Timing. Her discovery came at a time when transatlantic travel was expanding, and public fascination with sea mysteries was high. 2. Imagery. A brig sailing itself, cargo safe, animals alive but crew vanished, is haunting and cinematic. 3. Precedent. She set the stage for the later Mary Celeste, showing how abandonment stories fascinated the public long before. Reflection. The mystery of the Rosalie is not about wreckage or storm, but about silence. A ship found sailing itself, her people gone, her fate unknown. Perhaps the crew fell victim to illness, piracy, or misjudgment. Or perhaps their story was swallowed whole by the Atlantic, leaving no record. What remains is the image of the brig herself, drifting under sail, empty cabins, untouched cargo, a ghost ship of the 1840s. Though less famous than the Mary Celeste, the Rosalie remains an important chapter in maritime mystery. She reminds us that ghost ships are not just tales of the supernatural, but real puzzles born of human fear, error, and the sea's vast silence. The mystery of SV Huronian, Phantom of Lake Superior. The Great Lakes are the world's largest inland seas. They have been the stage for countless maritime stories, from heroic voyages to deadly storms. But among their most haunting tales are those of ghost ships, vessels said to reappear after their loss, sailing empty, their crews gone forever. One of these stories belongs to the SV Huronian, a Canadian schooner that sank in 1879 on Lake Superior. While her wreck was real and her loss documented, legend soon arose that her ghostly outline still haunted the lake. The Huronian became not just a shipwreck, but a phantom schooner of the inland seas. The vessel the Huronian was a three-masted schooner, built in the mid-19th century for the grain and lumber trade on the Great Lakes. Like many schooners of her kind, she was, around 140 feet long. Crewed by a small team of 8 to 10 men. Built of sturdy timber, designed to carry heavy cargo between Ontario, Michigan, and Wisconsin. She was part of the vast merchant fleet that kept the industrial Midwest supplied during the 1800s. While she was not famous in her day, she was typical of the ships that made the Great Lakes a bustling inland highway. The final voyage in October 1879, the Huronian was sailing on Lake Superior, carrying a cargo of grain. The autumn storms had already begun, a dangerous time for schooners. Somewhere off the Canadian shoreline, she encountered a gale. What exactly happened is uncertain, but like so many other vessels on the lakes, she never reached port. Days later, pieces of wreckage washed ashore. Reports confirmed the schooner had gone down with all hands. None of the crew survived. Aftermath: the sinking of the Huronian was one of many maritime tragedies on the lakes during the 19th century. Shipwrecks were common. Lake Superior is deep, cold, and merciless in bad weather. But in the years that followed, sailors began to tell strange stories. The Huronian, they said, had not entirely disappeared. The ghost ship legend: according to folklore, the Huronian's phantom could sometimes be seen on stormy nights. Witnesses described a three-masted schooner, sails tattered, driving through heavy seas. She appeared suddenly out of mist, silent and eerie. Some claimed she glowed faintly, as though lit by ghostly lanterns. Others said she vanished as quickly as she appeared, dissolving back into the storm. For sailors, her appearance was seen as a bad omen, a warning of storms and shipwrecks to come. Comparisons to other ghost ships: the Huronian's legend parallels other famous ghost ship tales. Like the Flying Dutchman, she was a phantom said to appear during storms as an omen of doom. Like the Eliza battle in Alabama, she became part of regional folklore tied to a real disaster. Like the Mary Celeste, she symbolized the eerie silence of a vessel lost at sea. But what makes the Huronian unique is her Great Lakes setting, far from the open oceans, yet equally haunted by tales of phantom ships. Skeptical explanations: not all believed the ghost stories. Skeptics offered natural explanations: mirages. The Great Lakes are prone to superior mirages, where distant ships appear ghostly and distorted above the horizon. Other schooners: with so many similar vessels on the lakes in the 1800s, it's possible ordinary ships were mistaken for the phantom Huronian. Folklore memory: the tragedy of her loss made sailors more likely to interpret strange sights as her ghost. But to believers, these explanations were hollow. Too many witnesses, they said, had seen the Huronian to dismiss the legend entirely. Why the legend endures: the Huronian continues to be remembered because her name, Huronian, directly linked her to the lakes, evoking both Lake Huron and the Huronian rocks of Canada. It was a name fit for a legend. Her tragic end, the total loss of ship and crew, gave her a haunting aura. The setting: Lake Superior, is vast, cold, and unforgiving. A ghost ship sighted on its stormy waters fits perfectly into its lore. The wreck today: unlike some Great Lakes wrecks that have been found by divers, the exact remains of the Huronian have not been positively identified. Lake Superior's depths and poor visibility make exploration difficult. This absence of a confirmed wreck site has only fueled her legend: a ship without a grave is free, in folklore, to sail forever. Reflection: the Huronian was an ordinary schooner, one of hundreds lost on the Great Lakes. But her story outlived the others because it became more than history. For sailors who braved Superior storms, she became a warning, a phantom bark glimpsed in lightning flashes, reminding them of how quickly the lake could claim lives. Perhaps the ghost ship is nothing more than mirage, memory, and imagination. Or perhaps, as many believe, the Huronian still sails in spectral form, forever bound to the waters where she and her crew perished. On Lake Superior, where storms strike with oceanic fury, her legend continues, a phantom schooner, carrying silence, sorrow, and mystery across the inland sea. The ghost ship Maritime, the light off Block Island off the coast of Rhode Island. Sailors speak of a light that appears above the waves on stormy winter nights. Some say it is the glow of a burning ship, drifting silently before vanishing into the dark. Others insist it is a trick of weather, or the play of moonlight on spray. But for more than 2 centuries, this light has been tied to one of America's most enduring ghost ship legends, the Palatine. Based on a real tragedy in 1738, the story of the Palatine has been told and retold in folklore, ballads, and eyewitness accounts. It is part history, part legend, and entirely haunting. The real Palatine, the ship at the heart of the legend, was actually the Princess Augusta, a German emigrant vessel sailing from Rotterdam to Philadelphia in 1738. She carried nearly 300 passengers, mostly poor emigrants from the Palatinate region of Germany, seeking a new life in America. Conditions aboard were horrific. Overcrowded, underprovisioned, and struck by storms, the voyage became a nightmare. Disease spread, passengers died, and discipline collapsed. By the time the battered ship neared New England, desperation had set in. Driven off course, the Princess Augusta drifted toward Block Island, Rhode Island. There, her story took its final, tragic turn. The tragedy: when the ship reached Block Island in December 1738, she was in ruins. Her captain was dead. Survivors were starving and weak. Accounts differ, but it seems Block Island residents went out to meet the ship. Some later accused the islanders of luring the ship to wreck for salvage, a practice whispered about in folklore. Others argued that they did what they could to save lives and property in a desperate situation. What is clear is that many passengers perished, either at sea or shortly after landing. The vessel, abandoned and broken, eventually burned, whether by accident, storm, or human hand. The survivors dispersed, but the ship itself was lost. Birth of the legend: from this tragedy grew the legend of the ghost ship Palatine. Sailors began reporting a strange light off Block Island, especially on stormy nights near Christmas, the anniversary of the disaster. The light looked like a burning vessel, drifting silently across the horizon before fading away. Islanders themselves told of seeing it, and soon the tale spread along the New England coast. By the early 19th century, the story was firmly established: the Palatine, as the Princess Augusta came to be misremembered, haunted the waters where so many died. Descriptions of the Palatine light: witnesses described the phantom in many ways: a ship aflame, sails and rigging outlined in fire. A glowing light, drifting low on the horizon before vanishing. A luminous haze, sometimes mistaken for a real vessel in distress. The light was said to appear most often around Christmastime, echoing the date of the original wreck. For some, it was the souls of the emigrants, reliving their suffering. For others, it was divine punishment for cruelty or neglect. Folklore and ballads: the story of the ghost ship Palatine entered American folklore in the 19th century. In 1869, John Greenleaf Whittier, the famous poet, wrote The Palatine, a ballad immortalizing the legend. His verses described the burning ship, doomed to sail forever, as a warning. Local storytellers embellished the tale, adding details of islanders luring the ship to wreck with false lights, an accusation never proven, but one that gave the story a sinister edge. The Palatine light thus became not just a ghost story, but a moral tale about greed, cruelty, and the cost of human suffering. Theories and skepticism: like all ghost ship legends, the Palatine light has skeptics. Natural explanations: scientists suggest the light could be marsh gas, phosphorescence, or atmospheric refractions known as fata morgana, which make distant lights appear as ghostly ships. Misidentified vessels, fishing boats or coastal schooners could have been mistaken for a phantom ship in bad weather. Folklore memory: once the story was established, islanders may have interpreted ordinary lights as the Palatine. Still, the consistency of reports over centuries, from sailors, islanders, and even tourists, keeps the legend alive. Symbolism of the Palatine: the legend endures because it represents more than just a shipwreck. Immigrant suffering: the Palatine tragedy was part of the broader story of German emigrants who endured brutal voyages to the New World. Human greed versus compassion: the legend's accusation that islanders lured the ship to wreck forces reflection on morality in desperate times. Haunting memory, the ghost ship embodies the idea that great suffering leaves an imprint, replaying itself as light and fire on the horizon. Comparisons to other ghost ships. The ghost ship Palatine stands with other great maritime legends. Like the Flying Dutchman, she is doomed to sail forever, a warning to those who see her. Like the Eliza Battle of Alabama, her ghostly reappearance is tied to the anniversary of her fiery loss. Unlike the Mary Celeste, her story is not about abandonment but about human tragedy, and the souls who never found peace. Reflection. The Palatine, or the Princess Augusta, as she was truly named, was a real vessel, carrying real people, lost in a real tragedy. But from those cold December nights of 1738, a legend was born that still glimmers off Block Island today. Perhaps the Palatine light is only mirage or misperception. Or perhaps, as locals believe, it is the burning ghost ship itself, returning each winter to remind the living of the dead. What is certain is that the ghost ship Palatine endures, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a story to be remembered. A story of emigrants who suffered, of islanders accused, and of a vessel that sails forever in fire.